Chapter 1550. Good disciple, you have to remember. Whether it's the Qingping sword or the 4 fairy slaying swords, they are my swords, not yours. You're just a pawn used by my 2 unscrupulous senior brothers. Guhan felt as if his head was being lifted by something. Then, Tongtian's old face appeared in front of him. At that moment, Guhan finally saw his surroundings. As far as the eye could see, there was lush greenery everywhere, and at the same time it was filled with fresh and fragrant air. In the distance, he could even see the faintly discernible silhouette of the largest city. With one glance, Ji Yuhan could recognize that it was Yangjing City. I'm back in the main world. At that moment, Guhan understood that he had been taken out of the alternate dimension and arrived in the main world. Moreover, he was not far from Yangjing City. It was only about 100 kilometers away from Yangjing City. Only at this distance could he see the city walls of Yangjing City so clearly. At that moment, Guhan's head and body were actually floating in the air. Apart from Tongtian, Goddess Wudong and Lady Yunxiao were also behind him. Since these swords belong to Master, why don't you just kill me? Why did you wake me up? Although Ji Yuhan was in Tongtian's hands, he did not show the slightest hint of fear. You're very calm. This is very similar to me. Tongtian could not help but praise Guhan when he saw how calm he was. It's nothing. If one day you're in my hands like today and can't fight back, you'll lose all your fear. At most, you'll just die. Guhan smiled. He indeed looked like a human who had completely let go of life and death. It's not that easy to die. Tongtian looked at Guhan meaningfully. I have 1,000 ways to make you feel like you're better off dead than alive. If I may be so bold, is there anything in this world that's more painful than splitting a consciousness fragment? Guhan asked curiously. No. Sect leader Tongtian was calm. Then, Master, please torture your disciple. Your disciple can endure anything. Master, please do it. Ji Yuhan smiled. Ha ha ha. Your temper and mouth are like mine. It would be great if you were really my disciple. Tongtian laughed and threw Guhan's head away. Lady Yunxiao immediately flew up and held Guhan's head in her arms. Good disciple, I'm not like your Uncle Master and Uncle Master who like to talk. You're not like the 2 scoundrels of the Western sect who like to play tricks. Open your dimensional pocket and take out the 4 immortal slaying swords inside. Then, I'll let you live and let you reunite with your body. Then, you can return to your Yangjing City. In the future, you and I will fight again to decide the ownership of the world. What do you think? Sect leader Tongtian laughed out loud. Master, you really want the 4 fairy slaying swords? Ji Yuhan could not help but smile. Disciples Juxian 4 swords are in that dimensional pocket. Master's power is unparalleled, and you are also the only saint in the world. You could have forcefully opened Disciple's dimensional pocket. Why would you let Disciple live? Humph, if I could open your dimensional pocket, you unfilial disciple would have been dead already. I definitely wouldn't spare your life. After all, you are the last chi of this world, and this is the best opportunity to kill you. I really don't want to let go of this opportunity, sect leader Tongtian said coldly. Ha ha ha, in your eyes, the 4 fairy slaying swords are more important than the world? Guhan asked. Tongtian did not answer. He just looked at Guhan quietly. Ji Yuhan's heart was clear. The reason why Tongtian sect leader kept him alive was because of the 4 immortal execution swords. As soon as he found out that it was a trap, Guhan stuffed all the 4 fairy slaying swords into the dimensional pocket and sealed them firmly. He even used consciousness fragments to block the entrance of the dimensional pocket. This made it impossible for Tongtian to break the dimensional pocket by force. Unless Guhan agreed, it was impossible to open Guhan's dimensional pocket in any case. This was the only reason why Guhan survived. It seemed that Tongtian still had a deep hatred for the 4 fairy slaying swords. It was just that it was unknown whether Tongtian wanted to get the 4 fairy slaying swords to take back what belonged to him or to take revenge. After all, if it were not for the betrayal of the 4 fairy slaying swords, it was very likely that Tongtian would have defeated his fellow disciples. Why did he have to endure endless torture in the seamless corridor? Master, if you want the 4 fairy slaying swords, I can agree to your deal. Guhan finally said after a long silence. All right, I can swear to my true self that as long as you hand over the 4 immortal exterminating swords to me, I will allow you and your body to fuse together. Furthermore, I will not appear to cause trouble for you for 30 years. 30 years later, you and I will fight again and finally decide the fate of the world. Tongtian said lightly. These words sounded like empty words, but since Tongtian swore to his true self, it was enough to prove the authenticity of this oath. Haha, Master, in order to kill me, I'm afraid you've already used up what's left of your consciousness fragments. These 30 years are probably used by Master to recuperate. Even if you don't take this oath, these 30 years are also mine. Master, don't lie to me anymore. Ji Yuhan laughed and unceremoniously exposed the true situation of sect leader Tongtian. So what? Seeing that his purpose had been exposed by Guhan, Tongtian did not change his expression at all. He still said in a calm tone, if you don't agree, you won't even have 30 years. Didn't I agree just now? Guhan smiled bitterly. But you and I can change the conditions. Suddenly, I don't want the 30 years. I only want another condition. What condition? Tongtian asked with narrowed eyes. Master, you can take the 4 fairy slaying swords, but I hope that you can leave the Qingping sword for me. Guhan finally said this condition. You want the Qingping sword? A trace of killing intent flashed across Tongtian's eyes. I understand. You want revenge, right? You want to avenge Qingping's sword for plotting against you yesterday. Yes. Guhan stared blankly at Tongtian, not concealing the grief, anger, and killing intent in his heart. Qingping is the first sword lady in my life, and she's also my favorite. I treat her like my own daughter and give her everything I can. But in the end, Disciple did not change her at all. The moment she inserted herself into Disciple's heart was already dead. If Disciple does not take revenge, then Disciple will never be able to revive, and Disciple will no longer have a need to live. Ji Yuhan said through gritted teeth. I see. I can understand your feelings very well. Hearing Ji Yuhan's words, Tongtian's eternally unchanging face suddenly revealed an expression of deep sympathy. Good Disciple, I'm actually the same as you. 1,000 years ago, when I saw the 4 immortal slaying swords, which I had painstakingly refined for tens of millions of years, insert them into my body, I felt the same as you now. Even though I had already severed the 3 separations, I still can't forget that bone-deep hatred. Tongtian said faintly, so, after you got the 4 immortal slaying swords back, you had to tear out all the souls of these 4 evil creatures and trap them in the time void that has no future. Only by making them suffer for endless years could you make up for the hatred in your heart. Tongtian's words made Divine Mother Wudang and Mistress Cloud Sky, who were behind Guhan, shiver. They had heard of the time void before. It was said that it was a place where time could not touch. Similar to the seamless corridor, it was a place where there was no concept of time, and a moment there was equal to eternity. However, the difference between the seamless corridor and the seamless corridor was that the seamless corridor had an exit, but the time void had absolutely no exit. Even a saint would not be able to escape after entering the time void, because it was the graveyard of the world, the place where countless worlds died and collapsed. Unless one could surpass all the worlds, it was impossible to leave the time void. That's great. Since Master can understand my pain, please give me the Qingping sword, and I will definitely return the 4 immortal slaying swords to you. Guhan said immediately. Disciple, if only one sword stays by your side when all your sword ladies betray you, and uses its own life to protect you, even if it becomes an ordinary sword in the end, will you let this sword leave your side and give it to your enemy? Tongtian said lightly. I see. I understand now. Guhan's face darkened, and he said emotionally, Master, please do it. You can raise other conditions, and I might be able to agree to it. Tongtian tried to persuade Guhan when he saw the determination on his face. There's no point in saying more. I don't have any conditions other than the Qingping sword. Guhan rejected him quite straightforwardly. Oh. So even the city in front of you can't change your mind? Tongtian pointed at Yangjing City in front of him and said. Haha, please forgive me for being blunt, but there are your grand disciples in Yangjing City, as well as the successor of the Lionian family and hundreds of thousands of swordbearers. With your current strength, I'm afraid you can't touch Yangjing City at all, Guhan said indifferently. Disciple, you're right. I can't touch this city now, and I don't want to touch this city either. However, if I don't move, the others won't. Coincidentally, they've already arrived. As soon as Tongtian's voice trailed off, countless clouds pressed down from the distant sky, covering the entire sky like giant prehistoric beasts. This was only the strange phenomenon in the sky. In the distant west, countless magical beasts' army were rushing over in a frenzy. In the east, all kinds of humans and demons were also coming over by treading on the sea. Finally, countless dimensional doors opened, and many human heroic spirits broke through the void and floated quietly in the sky of Yangjing City. The Heavenly Court, the Western Magical Beasts, the Fusang Divine Branch, and finally the Heroic Spirit Palace. These four largest Yuan Ku factions had come out in full force, and more than 90% of their forces were gathered near Yangjing City. They planned to completely destroy the remaining human forces in one fell swoop. Just by looking at the strength of the parties involved in the battle, this was already the most powerful battle in the past 1,000 years, with the greatest number of enemies. The humans were also facing the most dangerous moment in the past 1,000 years. The degree of danger was even greater than that of the 12th Zhu Wu. If the humans could win this battle, they would be able to wipe out all the Yuan Ku factions in one fell swoop, and the rule of the world would completely return to the hands of the humans. However, if the humans were defeated, there would probably no longer be a human race in this world. Chapter 1551. Sai. Seeing the crisis that humans were in, Guhan, who only had a head left, could not help but burst into tears. He looked at the city in the distance, as if he could see Lu Shihua and Lionian Ling fighting in Yangjing City. How about it? Have you made up your mind? Sect leader Tongtian asked calmly after waiting for a while. Master, you don't have to persuade me anymore. Guhan smiled. I'm not stupid. I'm afraid that the four fairy killing swords are the key to destroying this world. If Master did not obtain the four immortal slaying swords, then perhaps this world could still continue to exist. But if Master obtains the four immortal slaying swords, then we humans will truly die without a burial ground. So what if we have another 30 years? It's just a cup of soil. No, I'm afraid that even the soil will be gone by then. You're quite clear about this. Sect leader Tongtian sneered, but he did not deny what sect leader Tongtian said. He seemed to not want to persuade Guhan anymore, so he left directly. Before he left, he warned Goddess Wudang and Lady Yun Xiao, who were guarding the place, that Guhan must not have a moment to rest. They must keep Guhan's eyes on Yangjing City, so that Guhan could see everything that was happening in Yangjing City at all times. Soon, the reason for sect leader Tongtian's order was revealed. On the second day after sect leader Tongtian disappeared, Yuan Ku's army was finally ready. The allied army of the four major forces, as well as some small forces that were summoned by the four major forces, appeared one after another. They launched a desperate attack on Yangjing City with the four major forces. Fortunately, the dimensional wall system in Yangjing City had been repaired. Humans could rely on the complete dimensional wall to resist the attack of Yuan Ku's army. Both sides were in a stalemate around the dimensional wall for a whole day. Although Yuan Ku attacked very valiantly, he did not make much progress. After all, Yangjing City's dimensional barrier system was extremely thick. Even the 12 Zhu Wu had to attack for half a year to break through it. It was simply impossible for Yuan Ku's army to destroy the dimensional barrier in just one day. However, what everyone did not expect was that on that night, with a loud explosion under Yangjing City, the entire super-dimensional wall system instantly vanished into thin air. While the human sword-bearers were in a daze, Yangjing City's greatest means of protection had already been destroyed. There's a mole. A mole destroyed our dimensional barrier system, countless sword-bearers wailed. This sudden news had completely disrupted the minds of all the humans. The originally calm humans suddenly became extremely terrified. They couldn't understand how the core control room of the super-dimensional wall system, which was obviously so well protected and had several spirit sword-level sword-bearers specially guarding it, was completely destroyed by the opponent in an instant. Those spirit sword-level swordbearers who were guarding the door didn't even have time to react before they died in the hands of the opponent. And of course, Yuan Ku would not let go of such a wonderful opportunity. As soon as these Yuan Kus noticed the destruction of Yangjing City's dimensional wall system, they immediately reorganized their army and rushed to Yangjing City like a surging river. In a panic, under the leadership of Lu Shihua and Liuyan Ling, the humans stood on the city wall regardless of life and death and began to fight desperately with these Yuan Kus on the city wall. Although the human resistance was brave, Yangjing City was too big. The wall alone was hundreds of kilometers long, and on average, there were less than 5 swordbearers guarding every 100 meters. Facing the tide-like army of Yuan Ku, the human swordbearers often resisted for less than 2 or 3 minutes before their shields were broken and they died in the hands of Yuan Kus. In an hour, the casualties of the human swordbearers had exceeded 30%. The outermost city wall was breached, and the humans began to retreat frantically, directly abandoning the 6th, 5th, 4th, and 3rd city walls. All the swordbearers gathered on the 2nd city wall, barely blocking the crazy offensive of Yuan Kus. Because the 2nd city wall was the city wall that protected the entire core area, it was also the last barrier of human beings. Thanks to the 1-hour resistance of the swordbearers at the outermost city wall, a large number of ordinary people were able to retreat to the core area protected by the 2nd city wall. But when they retreated here, the humans had nowhere to retreat. The remaining human refugees were squeezed in the core area like sardines in a can. There were more than 20 people standing on each square meter of land, so one could imagine how bloated the core area was at this time. To put it bluntly, if any Yuan Ku threw a light cannon down, it could kill hundreds or thousands of humans. However, because the core area was small, the total length of the 2nd city wall was only slightly more than 20 kilometers. The human swordbearers had already formed a complete defense line on this city wall, and Yuan Ku's group could not break through the defense of the 2nd city wall for a while. Therefore, the situation was once again in a stalemate. However, every human knew that this stalemate was only temporary, and at the same time, it was also the last chance that the humans had for a stalemate. Once the 2nd city wall was breached, the humans would lose all means of defense, and all the ordinary people would be directly exposed to Yuan Ku's attack. At that time, the only choice that the humans had was to forcefully spread the human elites to various places in the world, let them hide, and wait for the opportunity to rise again. In the end, whether the humans would have the opportunity to rise again or not, only the will of the heavens would know. Fighting the heavens! Fighting the heavens! On the 2nd line of defense, a swordbearer suddenly let out a heart-wrenching roar because at this moment, his sword lady was torn into pieces under the siege of more than 10 Yuan Kus, and the body of the sword was trampled into pieces. This swordbearer lost his most beloved and last sword lady. At this moment, he was filled with grief and indignation, and tears of blood flowed from his eyes. Hongjun Jendi! Your Majesty Hongjun! Where are you? Please save us! All of a sudden, this sword-bearer shouted into the sky. His voice was so painful that it seemed to be able to penetrate the entire sky. Yes, Hongjun Jendi, where exactly is he now? Your Majesty Hongjun, save us. Your Majesty, save the humans, come out quickly. This shout seemed to arouse the thoughts of everyone else. Those sword-bearers who were in grief, indignation, and fear began to shout the name of Guhan and Hongjun Jendi in unison, hoping that the most powerful sword-bearer in human history could appear in front of them in time and save them from this desperate situation that was close to death. Guhan, where are you? Come back quickly. Even Liuyan Ling could not help shouting Guhan's name miserably while being surrounded by 5 Hong-level Yuan Kus. Chapter 1552. What the humans didn't know was that Hongjun Jendi Guhan, who was constantly being shouted and prayed to by them, hoping that he would come to save all humans like a savior, was now only left with his head floating in the air. He was being oppressed by 2 strong people at the flood level to watch and listen to the sorrowful cries of the humans. As for the purpose, there was no need to guess. Sect leader Tong Tian clearly knew that it was impossible to conquer Guhan with physical torture. Then the only thing that could be used was Guhan's obsession and protection of human beings. Sect leader Tongtian was indeed an old monster who had lived for tens of millions of years. He clearly knew what could really threaten Guhan. Sect leader Tongtian, come out. I agree to your request. I'll make a deal with you. Guhan shouted wildly. As Guhan's voice sounded, sect leader Tongtian appeared in front of Guhan. Good disciple, you finally figured it out, sect leader Tongtian said with a smile. This is all thanks to Master. If Master hadn't entered Yangjing City overnight yesterday and destroyed the control core of the super-dimensional wall protection system in Yangjing City, how could I have agreed to Master's request so readily? Guhan smiled miserably and looked at sect leader Tongtian. To be able to silently penetrate the super-dimensional wall protection system of Yangjing City, completely destroy the control core in a very short period of time, and even directly kill several spirit sword-level swordbearers with one sword strike. Who else in this world could do this except for the sect leader of Tongtian? It should be known that sect leader Tongtian was not Yuan Ku. He was a sage, the sage of all the worlds, including the main world and the dimensional world. Even the source of filth came from sect leader Tongtian. Sect leader Tongtian was by no means Yuan Ku, so it was naturally impossible for him to be stopped by the super-dimensional wall protection system that resisted Yuan Ku. He could easily enter the control core and destroy it at the same time. It's not Master's fault. It's your fault. If you hadn't disobeyed Master again and again, Master wouldn't have done such a thing, Tongtian said. Master, can I ask you a question? Guhan looked at Tongtian and asked weakly. Of course, my good disciple. Grandmaster Tongtian laughed. Dare I ask, Master, if I return the 4 immortal slaying swords to Master and commit suicide in front of Master, would Master be willing to let the humans go? Even if all humans become Master's slaves and work like cows and horses for Master? I only ask for Master's great kindness and benevolence to give up the thought of destroying humanity and the world. I will once again sit as the king of humanity and the master of the world. Is this enough to satisfy Master? Guhan said with tears streaming down his face. From these words, it could be heard that Ji Yuhan no longer wanted to live. He only hoped that he could use his death to exchange for the survival of humans, even if he had to become a slave. Instead of answering Guhan's question directly, Tongtian asked Guhan another question. Hey, disciple, do you know why Master decided to destroy the world and forge a new one? I don't know. Okay, then Master will tell you why. Tongtian stopped smiling and his face became extremely serious. Let me tell you a truth that even a child knows. If you write a word wrongly, you have to find a way to erase it and write it again. If a word is like that, then what about a world? If the world is wrong, then it should be destroyed and a new world should be created. In fact, disciple, you have always misunderstood me. In your heart, I may be a selfish villain, an ambitious person who wants to control the whole world by myself, right? After saying that, Tongtian looked at Guhan with an inquiring look. However, Guhan lowered his head and did not directly answer Tongtian's question. Obviously, he had acquiesced to this point. You don't have to feel embarrassed. In fact, not only you, but my 5 senior brothers and sisters also think so. In their hearts, I, Tongtian, have always been like this. I only have myself in my heart and no one else. At this point, a disdainful sneer suddenly appeared on sect leader Tongtian's face. But they never thought that if I, sect leader Tongtian, only wanted to benefit myself, why would I take in so many disciples, teach them all my skills, and give my primordial spiritual treasures and primordial supreme treasures to them? Ask your 2 senior sisters. Which one of them didn't grow to their current strength under the guidance of Master? I, sect leader Tongtian, ask myself if I'm worthy of every disciple under me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have fought with your 5 shameless senior brothers and sisters for those poor disciples who lost their lives in vain in the great war of God conferment. Let me ask you, except for me, who among my 5 senior brothers and sisters has accepted more disciples than me? Who else could give all the treasures except for the primordial supreme treasures of the sect to their disciples? Neither Yuansha Tianzuan nor Taishang Laojun has given any primordial spiritual treasure, let alone primordial supreme treasures. In terms of selflessness, I, Tongtian, am the most selfless person in the untainted land and the universe. Selfish people like my 5 senior brothers and sisters, who only think about themselves and don't care about others, don't deserve to be saints at all. They don't even have the qualification to be saints. They only deserve to be dogs. Tongtien's face flushed. Good disciple, you must have heard of this saying, saints are heartless and regard all living things as straw dogs. But I don't accept this saying. I want to turn this saying into saints are benevolent and regard all living things as their children and grandchildren. Therefore, I want to create a world of great benevolence and righteousness. The saints in this world are all responsible for the world. They love each other and influence the entire world with great benevolence and righteousness. Only such a world is a true world, a truly perfect world. This is the world that Master wants to create. At this point, Tongtien finally finished his words, and Ji Han was dumbfounded as he listened. For a long time, Guhan's thinking was very simple. He thought that the reason why Tongtien wanted to destroy the world was that he wanted revenge or to break through to a higher realm and achieve unprecedented achievements. However, Ji Han had never thought that Tongtien would have such an idea. He wanted to create a new world full of benevolence, righteousness, and love. The greatness of this ideal was comparable to that of Confucius and Marx, the great pioneers of the past. Of course, it was also possible that Tongtien was lying. He was just trying to deceive Ji Han. No one knew what he was really thinking. However, Ji Han had a feeling in his heart that what Tongtien said was true. This was what he was thinking in his heart. After all, at Tongtien's level, lying had become meaningless. His every word and action was determined by his own will. It was like a human telling an ant that he did not want to kill it, but trampling the ant to pieces. Unless this person was a psychopath, it was meaningless at all. Who would deceive an ant? After that, Tongtien looked at Guhan curiously and asked, "Good disciple, what do you think after hearing my dream?" "No, in terms of dreams, I agree with you very much. I'm even willing to sacrifice my life to realize your dream." Guhan took a deep breath and said, "But Master, if this is your dream, you can realize it now. Except for you, the other 5 sages are all dead. You are the only sage. You can change the whole world according to your dream. Why do you have to destroy this world and create another one? I'm willing to swear to God that I'll use all my abilities to help you realize your dream for the rest of my life. Please, Master, leave this world." "I can't." Tongtien shook his head. "Although my 5 senior and junior brothers and junior sisters are dead, my master is still alive. I'm not invincible in the world. Hongjun ancestor, he's not dead yet." Ji Han was shocked by the news, but after thinking about it carefully, it was not strange. After all, Hongjun ancestor was a realm higher than sect leader Tongtien. How could he die in the hands of sect leader Tongtien so easily? This was simply unbelievable. Now the question was, where was the real Hongjun ancestor? Was he hiding somewhere to recuperate, just like Tongtien's sect leader? Just as Guhan was thinking about this, Tongtien suddenly laughed. "Good disciple, don't think too much. My master is far away, but he's right in front of you." "Far away, but he's right in front of you?" Guhan was not stupid. After hearing Tongtien's words, he immediately understood. Hongjun ancestor was not someone else, but himself. Hongjun Jendi. Hongjun ancestor. It's destined. Guhan suddenly realized. He had never thought of this until he was mentioned by Tongtien. Only then did Guhan realize that he was Hongjun ancestor who had disappeared. How could there be so many coincidences in the world? Ji Han was born with an extraordinary aptitude. He was born with the ability to synchronize with all the sword maidens. He was born with the ability to quickly master a profound technique like the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. He was also able to use his own strength to create a supreme sword technique like the chaos sword technique. At the same time, he was also loved by Kanzu, Taishang Laojun, Saint Jieyin, and others. He also easily synchronized the 4 immortal killing swords. Even his title was named Hongjun Jendi. All of this was not a coincidence, nor was it a compelling aura. It was because Guhan was extraordinary. He was the first sage since the creation of the untainted land. He had integrated with the Way of Heaven and was second only to the Great Way and Pangu, Hongjun ancestor. What? Ninth junior brother is Hongjun ancestor. It was also the first time Divine Mother Wudong and Mistress Yun Xiao had heard of this shocking news. They looked at Jiyu Han, who only had a head left, in disbelief. They could not understand how this ninth junior brother, who had been drinking with them a few days ago, turned out to be their master's master's master. He was the biggest boss in the untainted land, Hongjun ancestor. You too don't have to be too shocked. If he is really the reincarnation of master, I don't have the guts to call him my disciple. Although my master has always been stingy with me, he is my master who imparted Tao to me. I won't disobey him to this extent, Tongtian said. Hearing Tongtian's words, Goddess Wudong and Goddess Yunxiao unconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. But at the same time, they were curious. If Guhan was not the reincarnation of Hongjun ancestor, what was Guhan's real identity? Why did he have anything to do with Hongjun ancestor? First of all, I want to correct your misconception. Hongjun ancestor is not a person, but an identity. Just like how he is called Hongjun Jendi now. Sect leader Tongtian explained. Everyone, including Jiyu Han, showed an expression of listening attentively. I didn't know the so-called truth of this world until 1,000 years ago. In your eyes, we are now stepping on the main world. Surrounding the main world are the dimensional worlds, and this main world is the core of all the worlds. Actually, it's not like that. In fact, the main world we are in is just a dimensional world. The real main world is not our world. As for where the real main world is, I don't know. I only know that the existence in the main world is watching us silently. In their eyes, we are just like puppets. How could this be? How could our world not be the main world? Lady Yun Xiao's eyes widened. If her master hadn't said it herself, she wouldn't have believed it. How could her world not be the main world? I really do exist in this world. What's going on with those dimensional worlds? If our world is not the primary world, then what are those dimensional worlds that are attached to our world? Are they a lower level world? Jiyu Han asked absent-mindedly. No. Those worlds are still dimensional worlds, Tongtian said as he waved his sleeves. Dozens of balls of the same size floated beside him. Tongtian pointed at one of the balls and said, "This is our dimensional world." Then he pointed at the other balls and said, "These are the other dimensional worlds." All the dimensional worlds actually overlapped with each other. There was no distinction between primary and secondary, and there was no distinction between strong and weak. Every dimensional world was the same. And when the light shines on these worlds. As soon as sect leader Tongtian finished speaking, countless rays of light shone from all directions and shot toward these balls. Therefore, Jiyu Han was able to see the shadows cast by other worlds on the balls that represented his own world. These shadows are the dimensional worlds that you see in our world. These dimensional worlds that look inferior to the main world are actually the projections of countless main worlds in this world. Therefore, although they are of the same level as the main world, they are much weaker than our world and can only be dimensional worlds. This is the truth of this world, Tongtian concluded. Chapter 1553. What does it have to do with me being Hongjun ancestor? Guhan asked with a frown. He had no idea what the world Tongtian sect master mentioned had to do with Hongjun ancestor. The reason why a main world is born is because of the existence of its main character. Perhaps it can be said that the entire world was born because of the existence of this main character. To put it bluntly, your teacher is only a slightly more important supporting character, Tongtian sect master said with a smile, and this protagonist is called Hongjun. The protagonist when the world was created was Hongjun ancestor. Now, the protagonist is Hongjun Jendi. Isn't that what it means to be a leveler? Upon hearing Tongtian sect master's explanation, Guhan suddenly recalled what Fleeting Maple had told him about the identity of a leveler. Master, since Hongjun ancestor is the protagonist of the world, how did he die in your hands? Since he's the protagonist, it's impossible for him to die. Guhan asked curiously. That's all thanks to you. Sect leader Tongtian's words shocked Jiyu Han. Does the death of Hongjun ancestor have anything to do with me? Ji Yuhan thought. Hong Jun was the protagonist of the previous era, and you are the protagonist of this era. When two Hongjuns are protagonists, they can't meet each other. Once they meet, one of them must die. Tongtian sect master said. But I've never seen Hong Jun ancestor. How could we? Tongtian sect master's words made Guhan even more confused. It's true that you haven't met him face to face, but you've met my master's consciousness fragment once. Moreover, it was when my master was still alive. Tongtian sect master looked at Guhan meaningfully. Good disciple, do you remember the treasure-snatching rock? The treasure-snatching rock. Ji Yuhan recalled that in the world of 9 provinces, which he thought was an illusion, his consciousness fragment had entered the treasure-snatching rock and taken the 4 immortal killing swords away from the rock in order to obtain them. Could it be? Yes, the treasure-snatching rock was actually something that my master used to monitor me. I didn't know about it and kept it at home like a treasure. Now that I think about it, my master must have known that I was the one who would kill him long ago. He had been guarding against me for a long time. Fortunately, you came. Your consciousness fragment entered the treasure-snatching rock and met Master's consciousness fragment at the same time. When they met, Master's consciousness fragment died on the spot. The treasure-snatching rock, which was secretly controlled by Master, also fell apart because it lost its master and became a pile of fragments. Later, I used those fragments to forge that alternate space. That's why you could enter that alternate space so easily. Because it was originally formed because of your existence. At the same time, when your consciousness fragments collided with each other, the eternal world brush, which was powerful enough to destroy the world, was born. This brush is the greatest treasure you've ever given me. At this point, Tongtian sect master took out a brush from his body. It was a very ordinary brush, so ordinary that Guhan could not see anything different about it. This eternal world brush looks ordinary. In fact, it's so ordinary that it can't even kill a chicken. But it was formed by Hongjuan's destroyed consciousness fragment. It's the only treasure in the world that can kill my master. It's because of this brush that I was able to kill my master. Otherwise, my master would have wanted to kill me. Given my master's realm, which was about to transcend the Great Way, I was not his match at all. Listening to Tongtian sect master's words and looking at the ordinary brush, Guhan could not help but have a frightening guess. If this eternal world brush was Hongjuan's nemesis and had killed the previous Hongjun, would Zhongtai, who was Hongjun in this life, also be killed by this brush? Unfortunately, Tongtian sect master did not want to answer Guhan's question. He quickly put away the eternal world brush and did not let Guhan see it. Then, he stretched out a hand to Guhan and said, I've told you what you want to know. Release the 4 immortal killing swords, and I'll send you back to save your humans. Master, please put the dimensional pocket in my hand first. Guhan said with a wry smile. Like this. Tongtian sect master moved his finger, and the dimensional pocket that was originally hanging on Guhan's waist appeared on Guhan's palm. However, there was no reaction from the dimensional pocket. The 4 immortal killing swords did not come out of the pocket. Are you kidding me? Sect leader Tongtian's face was filled with anger. Disciple doesn't dare. Disciple has forgotten. Disciple no longer has a hand, so I'll have to trouble master to place the dimensional pocket on disciple's head. Any position is fine. As long as disciple's true self can come into contact with the dimensional pocket, disciple will be able to take out the 4 immortal slaying swords, Ji Yuhan replied. Yunxiao, you go. Tongtian sect master hesitated for a moment as if he was worried that Guhan would play some tricks. Therefore, he finally nodded to Yunxiao and asked her to take the dimensional pocket and put it on Guhan's head. Without any hesitation, Yunxiao quickly carried out Tongtian sect master's order and put the dimensional pocket on Guhan's head. This time, he was right. The dimensional pocket, which was originally tightly closed, slowly opened. Immortal killing sword, immortal extinguishing sword, immortal killing sword, immortal trapping sword. 4 sword ladies slowly flew out of the dimensional pocket and floated in front of Tongtian. Immortal slaying, immortal ending, immortal trapping, immortal slaying. You've finally appeared again. I, your master, have finally found you. This time, you can forget about escaping from my grasp. At this point, Tongtian still had a kind expression on his face, looking as amiable as a next-door neighbor. However, in the next second, sect leader Tongtian's expression suddenly changed. His amiable expression turned into one of viciousness and anger. "You four bitches. How dare you betray me back then? Today, I will let you experience the feeling of being betrayed by others. So what if you found a new master? Didn't he still throw you to me in the end?" At this moment, Tongtian's resentment toward the 4 immortal slaying swords finally erupted. He made a grabbing motion toward the 4 immortal slaying swords, and they flew toward his palm involuntarily. Right at this moment, a ray of light that was as fast as lightning suddenly flashed out of the dimensional pocket. Even with sect leader Tongtian's eyesight, he could not even see the appearance of this ray of light clearly. The ray of light had already swept the 4 immortal slaying swords and pierced sect leader Tongtian's internal organs. "Bastard!" Tongtian sect master spat out a mouthful of golden blood. He then grabbed the 4 immortal killing swords that had pierced into his body and wanted to pull them out. However, before Tongtian sect master could exert any strength, the 4 immortal killing swords flew out by themselves and flew in 4 different directions. Finally, they suppressed the 4 directions. A colorful light shield, like a sky curtain, instantly enveloped the entire battlefield. Chapter 1554. Immortal Killing Sword Formation. Sect leader Tongtian covered the 4 bleeding wounds on his body with one hand and looked incredulously at the 4 immortal killing swords that were suppressing the 4 directions in the air. This scene was clearly sect leader Tongtian's trump card, the immortal killing sword formation. However, at this moment, the immortal killing sword formation was in the hands of another person, and this person even used it against him. Guhan. Sect leader Tongtian immediately looked at Guhan. "His here." Lady Yunxiao raised Guhan's head in her hand. Guhan's head was still in her hand, and Guhan's body was still hundreds of meters away from Guhan. "This is impossible. This is impossible. Your body has clearly been separated from your head, and there is no sword essence in your body. How can you use the 4 immortal killing swords and the immortal killing sword formation?" Sect leader Tongtian said in disbelief. He could not understand how Guhan could use the immortal killing sword formation with only his head. Although sect leader Tongtian had just been resurrected, he had a good understanding of the sword bearers through the impurities that returned to his body, which were fragments of consciousness. He knew that if the sword bearers wanted to control the sword ladies, they must be responsible for providing sword essence to them, and at the same time, their minds must be able to communicate with the sword scars in their bodies. Therefore, sect leader Tongtian separated Guhan's head from his body in advance and isolated the connection between them with magic. Guhan's body seemed to be only hundreds of meters away from Guhan, but in fact, it was in another space. Therefore, it was impossible for Guhan to receive the support of the sword essence and sword scars in his body. Therefore, sect leader Tongtian was very sure that Guhan could not control the 4 immortal killing swords. However, what happened in front of him completely disrupted sect leader Tongtian's understanding. "Who said my head is separated from my body?" A void gate was opened in the sky. Guhan walked out of the void gate with his clean clothes and elegant demeanor. The moment Guhan appeared, the 4 immortal slaying swords simultaneously let out a series of sword cries as if responding to their master. If there was any inharmonious factor at this moment, it would be the fact that Guhan didn't have a head, only a body. This was a headless corpse that walked out of a dimensional pocket. "You have another body." Sect leader Tongtian was completely stunned. He instinctively glanced at the body he had sealed. It was also Guhan's body, and his Qingping sword was still stuck in it. Where did Guhan's body come from? Not good. Yun Xiao, immediately destroy that head. Sect leader Tongtian seemed to have understood something and immediately ordered Lady Yun Xiao. At the same time, he covered his bleeding wound and rushed toward Guhan's head. "Here you go." Yun Xiao's reaction was rather fast. As soon as sect leader Tongtian gave the order, she threw Guhan's head to the body that suddenly appeared. Guhan's body was obviously stunned, and he immediately placed the head on his neck. The 2 pieces of flesh that had been separated for a long time fused together in an instant. In less than a second, the complete Guhan returned, and Guhan returned to his strongest state. Yunxiao, you also betrayed Master. On the other hand, sect leader Tongtian was so angry that his eyes were about to crack. He never expected Lady Yunxiao to betray him at this moment. Unlike Guhan, who became a disciple halfway through his life, Lady Yunxiao was taken in as a disciple by sect leader Tongtian the moment she was born. It could be said that sect leader Tongtian watched Lady Yunxiao grow up, and she was also his favorite disciple. The reason why sect leader Tongtian set up the immortal slaying sword formation along the way was mostly because Lady Yunxiao was captured by Taishang Laojun. Sect leader Tongtian's feelings for Lady Yunxiao were almost on the same level as Guhan's feelings for Lu Shihua. Therefore, sect leader Tongtian could not understand why his favorite disciple would betray him at the last moment. I'm sorry, Master. I don't want to betray you, but I also love this world, and I don't want to see it destroyed. Lady Yunxiao suddenly knelt in front of sect leader Tongtian and said with tears in her eyes, I'm sorry, Master. I don't have the face to appear in front of you anymore. I'm going now. After saying that, Lady Yunxiao picked up her primordial chaos golden dipper and hit her head directly. In an instant, her head was smashed into pieces by the primordial chaos golden dipper, and blood splattered all over the ground. At the same time, the golden primordial spirit flew out of Lady Yunxiao's head. Just as the primordial spirit was about to hit the primordial chaos golden chalice, Ji Yuhan finally reacted and shouted, Senior sister. Before the spirit was completely destroyed, he put Lady Yunxiao's spirit and the rest of her body into his dimensional pocket. Stupid. What's so good about this world? Why don't you follow me and create a new world? Sect leader Tongtian's face looked much better when he saw Lady Yunxiao committing suicide, but he was also disappointed at her for failing to meet his expectations. Master, what should I do? Looking at this scene, the remaining incongruence divine Maiden was completely dumbfounded. She quickly hid behind the Tongtian sect leader and asked him in horror. Let's go. I haven't fully recovered yet, and I'm not a match for these 4 traitors. Sect leader Tongtian looked at the immortal killing sword formation and said to Goddess Wudang immediately. Yes, Master. Goddess Wudang said immediately. You want to leave? Don't even think about it. Guhan snorted coldly, and the circle formed by the 4 immortal killing swords began to close in quickly. The sword lights that filled the sky attacked sect leader Tongtian. At the same time, sect leader Tongtian rushed to the Qingping sword that was stuck in Guhan's body with all his might. This was sect leader Tongtian's only hope. Only with the Qingping sword, sect leader Tongtian had the ability to fight against the immortal killing sword formation. Otherwise, sect leader Tongtian would not even have a weapon that he could use. Although Guhan tried his best to control the immortal killing sword formation to stop sect leader Tongtian ignored his own injuries and went to the Qingping sword first. When he was about to pull out the Qingping sword happily, the sword suddenly turned around and pierced through sect leader Tongtian's heart. It pierced through sect leader Tongtian's heart and created a big hole. This scene was just like when Guhan was plotted against by the Qingping sword. Chapter 1555. Qingping. Sect leader Tongtian murmured Qingping's name, but Qingping paid no attention to him. She continued to launch fierce attacks on sect leader Tongtian. Seeing this, sect leader Tongtian could not help but burst into tears. A sense of desolation welled up in his heart. Sect leader Tongtian was in a very bad state. He had just been freed from the seal and his strength had not even recovered 1/10 of it. Now, he had come out to deal with Guhan. This was already a terrible situation. What was worse was that sect leader Tongtian had been pierced through by the 4 fairy killing swords and the Qingping sword. His heart was cold and his body was badly injured. In the end, he could only protect Goddess Wudang with one hand and watch helplessly as the 5 swords surrounded him. This time, it would not be so easy for sect leader Tongtian to break out. Master's good disciple, when did you notice all of this? Sect Master Tongtian asked Ji Yuhan curiously with a bitter smile on his face when he saw that he was in a situation where he could not escape even if he had wings. Before I answer this question, please answer a question for me, Master or Senior Sister. How did you trap Qingping's will and release his soul? Gu Han looked at the Qingping sword in front of him and asked. You've discovered it. Goddess Wudong was startled by Gu Han's words. She said in a trembling voice, I don't know. It seems that when Ancestor Qingping appeared in front of us, he was already Ancestor Qingping. Let me answer your question. Sect leader Tongtian smiled bitterly and said, I had anticipated the failure of the war of deification of the gods in advance, so I set up this alternate space early. At the same time, I attached fragments of my consciousness to the treasure-snatching rocks outside to prevent my two senior brothers from forcibly opening the alternate space in the future and destroying my last disciples and disciples. I didn't expect Qingping to enter the alien space. The consciousness fragment I attached to the treasure-snatching rock's entrance immediately entered the Qingping sword's body and helped Qingping suppress the disloyal willpower, Tongtian explained. It turned out that when Qingping and Gu Han had just arrived at Fusang Island, Qingping had followed the two human girls to the treasure-snatching rock. As a result, he had entered the alien space inside the treasure-snatching rock. In order to protect the existence of this alternate space, Tongtian placed his consciousness fragments at the entrance of the treasure-snatching rock. When the Qingping sword entered, his consciousness fragments immediately sensed the existence of the Qingping sword and directly entered its body. And in Qingping's sword, Qingping's consciousness had the upper hand, suppressing Qingping's consciousness. However, the difference between the two wasn't that great. Qingping had been trying to resist Qingping's suppression. With the help of Tongtian's consciousness fragments, Qingping had suppressed Qingping in the blink of an eye. In other words, after entering the alien space, the Qingping sword was no longer Qingping's sword, but the real Qingping sword. This was also the reason why the Qingping sword had betrayed Gu Han and pierced Gu Han's heart. This sword was no longer the original Qingping sword. What about you, my good disciple? When did you discover that the Qingping sword had changed? Tongtian looked at Gu Han and asked curiously. From the first time I entered this alien space. Gu Han glanced at the Qingping sword in front of him and said slowly, actually, when the Qingping sword put on a show in front of me, I had already discovered that my Qingping sword was no longer the Qingping sword, but the truth of the Qingping sword. What happened next was just to help you continue the show. What? You already discovered that we were acting at that time. Upon hearing Gu Han's words, the Wu-Tang goddess was extremely shocked. She had always thought that she was playing Gu Han from the beginning to the end, but in the end, she was the one being played by Gu Han. After the Qingping sword regained control of its body, it immediately found Goddess Wudong and Lady Yunxiao in the alien space. At the same time, it directly revealed its identity and the Tongtian sect leader's consciousness fragments. Goddess Wudong and Lady Yunxiao immediately knelt in front of the Qingping sword, indicating that they would completely obey the Qingping sword's command. Therefore, the real ruler of the entire alien space was not Lady Yunxiao and Goddess Wudong, but the seemingly silly Qingping behind them. Although Qingping had never taken control of this sword, she had always been by Gu Han's side. What Qingping could see, Qingping could also feel. Therefore, Qingping could be said to have a deep understanding of Gu Han and Gu Han's temperament and behavior patterns. At the same time, as the most trusted weapon of the Tongtian sect leader, Qingping also knew what the Tongtian sect leader's real purpose was. She also knew that Gu Han was the biggest obstacle to the Tongtian sect leader's rise. If she could kill Gu Han, there would no longer be any obstacles to the Tongtian sect leader's future plan. However, Qingping also knew that she was no longer a match for Gu Han. With the 4 fairy-killing swords and shield in hand, the Qingping sword could not deal with Gu Han by itself. Therefore, the Qingping sword finally decided to set a trap and lure Gu Han into it. Therefore, although the Qingping sword had regained control of the body and suppressed Qingping, she still pretended to be Qingping. Because the two were originally one body and Qingping knew Qingping very well, she was able to imitate Qingping so vividly that no one would notice anything wrong. At the same time, Qingping and Qingping could use this body perfectly. Therefore, to a certain extent, Qingping was also Gu Han's sword lady. As long as Qingping purposely hid it, Gu Han would not be able to discover the changes that happened to Qingping just by the connection between the sword marks. Qingping was confident enough to hide her true changes. As for Guhan's story in the alternate dimension, be it saving humans or the fact that his senior sister and junior brother went from opposing each other to becoming friends, it was actually all an act that the incongruence Divine Mother and Lady Yun Xiao put on for Guhan. They wanted Guhan to go from being enemies to being close to his senior sister and junior brother. If it was not for the fact that she was afraid that the process would be too fast and sudden, the incongruence Divine Mother would have made Guhan her junior brother the moment she saw him. The reason why she designed such a complicated drama was because Qingping knew Guhan very well. She knew that Guhan was very suspicious. If she did not use this long process and interpretation, as well as all sorts of logical changes in the plot, she would not be able to make Guhan believe that the incongruence Divine Mother and Lady Yun Xiao sincerely wanted to be his senior sister. All in all, it was just a well-arranged drama. And all this drama was for the moment when she met sect leader Tongtian. In fact, the day before sect leader Tongtian appeared, sect leader Tongtian had already secretly come to the alternate dimension and met the incongruence Divine Mother and Lady Yun Xiao to decide how to capture and kill Guhan. This was also the scene that Guhan saw yesterday. Sect leader Tongtian gave his 8 trigrams immortal robe to the incongruence Divine Mother and coaxed Guhan to put it on. In this way, he put a pair of tight handcuffs on Guhan's hands. Naturally, sect leader Tongtian and the others would be able to win. It had to be said that this was a very good trap. If the person who fell into this trap was not Guhan, he would probably have fallen into the trap and could not get out. However, the incongruence Divine Mother was not facing anyone but Guhan. Therefore, this plan was immediately discovered by Guhan. In fact, when Guhan saw Qingpin for the first time, he felt that something was wrong. Although Guhan could not tell what was wrong, he just felt that this Qingpin was not the real Qingpin, even though Qingping's acting was so realistic. Later on, Guhan remembered that this chubby Qingpin's mouth had become extremely picky after being fed by him. No matter how good the pork was, Qingpin would never eat it without careful cooking. However, the first thing Ji Yuhan saw when he saw the paw was that the paw was happily eating the longevity fruit in his hands, which were the chubby little bugs. These bugs were simply roasted on the fire, and the paw did not mind eating them into his stomach. He even looked like he was wolfing them down. In order to confirm this, Ji Yuhan had secretly gotten a longevity fruit, and after thinking about it in the way of a monster, he took a bite. He found that other than the light taste, there were almost no obvious characteristics, and there was even a faint sour taste in it. Guhan understood Qingpin. This was definitely not Qingpin's taste, and Qingpin would definitely not eat this thing. Qingpin's act of wolfing down food was originally to show off his foodie attribute, but he did not expect it to expose his problem in the end. Just based on this, can you confirm that Qingping is not your sword maiden? Aren't you being a little too hasty? After Guhan finished explaining the matter, the goddess of Wudong said with a wry smile. That's not entirely true, so I tested Qingping once as well. At this point, Guhan pointed to his chest. Only then did the Grandmaster of Heaven and the goddess of Wudong realize that there was a small cloth bag hanging on Guhan's chest. What is this? The goddess of Wudong asked curiously. This is called a nurturing pouch. Guhan said indifferently, if she really is Qingpin, as long as she sees this bag, she will impatiently crawl in. The real Qingpin has always been close to my heart. As for that Qingping, I don't know if she didn't see this bag, or if she instinctively hated it and wanted to stay with me. In the end, she chose to ignore this nurturing pouch, and I was finally sure that she wasn't my Qingpin. Chapter 1556. I didn't expect that I, Tongtian, would be defeated by a nurturing pouch. After listening to Guhan's explanation, Tongtian looked up at the sky and sighed. I've already expected that you would be my biggest obstacle after 1,000 years. Therefore, before I was sealed, I threw Qingping out. At the same time, I told her to lurk around you as soon as you appeared. At that time, she could coordinate with me and help me kill you, my evil disciple. I didn't expect that Qingpin would be the cause of my success and failure. I still lost to Qingpin in the end, and I actually gave it to you personally. Tongtian sighed. It turned out that the reason why Qingpin appeared beside Guhan was actually arranged by Tongtian in advance. He originally thought that Qingping's sword could become his trump card in the end, But he didn't expect that this trump card would pierce through his heart instead. It was sect leader Tongtian himself who gave his most precious sword to Jiyu Han. Only sect leader Tongtian himself knew how helpless sect leader Tongtian's words were. Then how did you gain control of Qingping? If I'm not wrong, it's still my Qingping who is controlling Qingping's sword now. Tongtian looked at Qingping's sword in front of him and said gloomily. Nothing, it's just a mandatory order. Gu Han said lightly, Master, since you know the sword bearer so well, you should know that as long as the sword mark is still in my body, as long as I give a mandatory order to the sword mark, the sword lady must act according to my will, no matter what her will is. Mandatory order. I actually forgot about this. Hearing what Gu Han said, Tongtian's face suddenly changed. It seemed that he really forgot about this variable. Actually, you can't blame me. It's not that you forgot about this design, but that your Qingping forgot about this setting. Gu Han looked at Qingping's sword lovingly. I treat Qingping sincerely, and I'm never willing to give any order that goes against Qingping's own will. In the 20 years that I've been with Qingping, I've never given any mandatory order to Qingping, so your Qingping probably forgot about this. Otherwise, she would definitely ask Master to trap her in the dimensional space instead of directly stabbing the sword into that corpse. I see. Tongtian smiled bitterly. At the same time, his eyes fell on the headless corpse, and he asked curiously, this corpse shouldn't be yours, right? Whose corpse is it? It's a person named Wuzhang Shifang. Master, have you ever heard of this name? Gu Han asked Tongtian with a sigh. Wuzhang Shifang? Tongtian was stunned for a moment, and then he shook his head. He's just a nobody. How can I recognize him? But such a nobody became the key to killing you, Master. Gu Han let out a long sigh and could not help but recall what happened more than 20 days ago. No one knew that on the night they arrived in Yamato City, Gu Han did not stay in his room. Instead, he had been sitting in Wuzhang Shifang's room and chatting with Wuzhang Shifang for a whole night. He had already understood the change of the paw sword and decided to beat him at his own game. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Just like what happened today, he suddenly appeared from an impossible place and caught sect leader Tongtian off guard. But where exactly did he come from? How could he catch a powerhouse like sect leader Tongtian by surprise? In the end, Gu Han fixed his eyes on his dimensional pocket. Because living people could not survive in the dimensional pocket, Gu Han believed that once he suddenly came out of the dimensional pocket, Tongtian would not be able to detect it, let alone guard against it. However, in order to achieve this goal, Jiyu Han had to hide in the dimensional pocket in advance, and outside the dimensional pocket, there had to be someone who could cooperate with him to make sect leader Tongtian believe that the person outside was the real him. Therefore, Jiyu Han went to Wuzhang Shifang. This time, Jiyu Han did not hide anything. He told Wuzhang Shifang everything about sect leader Tongtian, including all his plans. Finally, he asked Wuzhang Shifang to decide whether he wanted to help Jiyu Han at the risk of losing his life. In fact, Gu Han's decision itself was also taking a huge risk. After all, Wuzhang Shifang was a traitor who betrayed mankind. If Wuzhang Shifang revealed all this to the people of that organization, Gu Han's plan would fall short of success. In the end, Wuzhang Shifang did not let Gu Han down. After a long hesitation, Wuzhang Shifang finally nodded and agreed to Gu Han's request, allowing Gu Han to cut off his head. What happened next was easy. At the edge of Fusang Island, Liunian Ling had already waited there in advance according to Gu Han's arrangement to bring back all the humans and swordbearers from Yamato City. However, in order to fool others, Liunian Ling directly changed into Song Yifei's appearance under Song Yifei's manipulation. In this way, outsiders and spies would think that Song Yifei was returning to Yangjing City with these humans. Anyway, Liunian Ling had always been elusive. Occasionally disappearing for a day would not arouse others' suspicion. Song Yifei and Gu Han returned to Yamato City together. Song Yifei changed into Wuzhang Shifang's appearance and continued to stay in Yamato City. Except for issuing some basic orders, he had been staying in his room. Occasionally, he would show up to show his existence. Because a large number of swordbearers had left Yamato City, Wuzhang Shifang's passive behavior seemed very normal. There was no doubt that it was because his dream had suffered a huge blow and he needed time to recover. In fact, no one knew that the real Wuzhang Shifeng's body and head had already been separated. The head was kept in a medical cabin, while the body was kept in a dimensional pocket. When Incongruence Goddess forced Guhan to change his clothes, Guhan had already keenly sensed that the enemy was about to make a move. At the same time, it was also the most critical moment of Guhan's plan. Guhan used the excuse that he needed to take off his clothes as an excuse to send Incongruence Goddess away. Then, he cut off his head at lightning speed and threw his body into his dimensional pocket. At the same time, he fused Wuzhang Shifeng's body and his head together. This seemingly inconceivable and frightening operation was actually a very simple task in Ji Yuhan's hands. He only needed to use his consciousness fragments to control the nanomachines to stitch the head and the body together. For Guhan, the real problem was how to control Wuzhang Shifeng's body to fight. The reason Guhan wanted to use Wuzhang Shifeng's body was for the sword marks and sword essences in Wuzhang Shifeng's body. If that was not the case, Guhan could use an ordinary person's corpse. However, this corpse could not simulate the strength that an emperor swordbearer should have. Moreover, there would be no sword marks in the body. This would not deceive the Grandmaster of Heaven. Therefore, Guhan had to use the body of an immortal swordbearer. However, there was another problem. Although this body was controlled by Guhan, the sword marks and sword essences in the body could not be used by Guhan. This was because Wuzhang Shifeng's sword marks were connected to Wuzhang Shifeng's soul. This was something that Guhan could not imitate. In the end, Wuzhang Shifeng could only make a greater sacrifice. He took a risk and let Guhan take out his brain. Then, Guhan placed it in his abdominal cavity. At the same time, he connected the eye nerves in Guhan's head. In this way, Wuzhang Shifeng could fight the Grandmaster of Heaven with Guhan's head on his neck. The inspiration for this idea came from the story of the Xingtian Grand Wizard in the Sage Relic. Without a head, he used his belly as his head to fight the Celestial Emperor. It happened to be used by Guhan in this matter. However, in this way, Wuzhang Shifeng would have to take a great risk. According to Guhan's speculation, as long as the Grandmaster of Heaven still wanted to get the 4 immortal slaying swords, he would not kill him directly. He would definitely keep him alive. However, the Grandmaster of Heaven might only keep his head and destroy his body to completely destroy the possibility of Guhan's counterattack. In this case, the brain in the body's belly would be in a fatal danger. Although Guhan had left a part of Wuzhang Shifeng's brain and soul in the dimensional pocket in advance, just like when he repaired Lu Shihua, Guhan could create a new body for Wuzhang Shifeng. However, the destruction of a large number of souls was a fatal thing for the old Wuzhang Shifeng. Even if he was repaired later, it would be impossible for him to return to his previous state. He would become even older. More importantly, he would completely lose his sword marks and sword essences, and become an ordinary person from then on. The reason why Lu Shihua could be resurrected to his complete state was that Mingyuan Zhendi secretly protected Lu Shihua's most important purple mansion. However, at that time, Guhan would not be able to protect Wuzhang Shifeng's purple mansion. In the end, Wuzhang Shifeng agreed to Guhan's request without hesitation. There was the most incredible deceptive trick in history. The head and body that were split into 2 by the Grandmaster of Heaven actually belonged to 2 different swordbearers, while the real body had been staying in the dimensional pocket. What happened next was needless to say. Guhan tricked the Grandmaster of Heaven into letting him open the dimensional pocket. Then, under the control of the fragments of consciousness and soul that Guhan deliberately left in his body directly came out with the 4 immortal slaying swords and launched the most fatal blow to the Grandmaster of Heaven, who was caught off guard and completely unprepared. It was precisely because of this shocking blow that the history of the entire world changed at this moment. Chapter 1557. Good plan, disciple. You're really amazing. You've even schemed against me. You're really worthy of being my disciple. After listening to Guhan's explanation, sect leader Tongtian let out a long sigh and said, "Come on, let's do it. Let's see how capable my disciple is and whether he can really kill his master." "Yes, master." Guhan nodded. The 4 immortal killing swords and the Qingpin sword, which were originally floating beside him, moved again. Under Guhan's control, the 4 immortal killing swords did not attack, but suppressed the 4 directions to prevent sect leader Tongtian from escaping the immortal killing sword formation. It was the 4 immortal killing swords that were responsible for the attack. Under the control of Ji Han, countless surging sword qis gushed out of the 4 immortal killing swords. At this time, there was no need for any mysterious swordsmanship. There were so many sword qis that sect leader Tongtian had no chance to dodge. He could only fight against these dense sword qis head-on. Of course, sect leader Tongtian did not care about ordinary sword qi. Those sword qi could not even hurt a hair of sect leader Tongtian. However, these sword qi came from the 4 immortal killing swords. The 4 immortal killing swords were the strongest killing method in the world and the embodiment of the killing intent of the Great Way. The murderous intent and sharpness in the sword qi were something that even sect leader Tongtian could not completely defend against. The main reason why sect leader Tongtian was sealed by other sages was that the 4 immortal killing swords were on the side of the sages. In the face of the extremely terrifying murderous intent of the 4 immortal killing swords, sect leader Tongtian had no way to deal with it. 1,000 years ago, sect leader Tongtian was already in such a state. 1,000 years later, sect leader Tongtian, who had been seriously injured, naturally had no better means to deal with it. He could only choose to fight it head-on. Soon, sect leader Tongtian was covered in wounds and blood from head to toe. Fortunately, Guhan, the controller of the immortal killing world, was not a sage. Otherwise, if Guhan had reached the level of a sage and mastered the power of the Way of Heaven, sect leader Tongtian would have died as long as he injected this power into the sword qi of the 4 immortal killing swords. Although the Tongtian sect leader could still resist the attacks of the immortal slaying sword formation, the incongruence Divine Mother was almost at her limit. Although Ji Han did not care about the incongruence Divine Mother at all, nor did he plan to waste his sword qi on her, the incongruence Divine Mother was still affected by a few strands of sword qi, and it was only those strands of sword qi that severed an arm and a leg of the incongruence Divine Mother. There was also a huge gash on her stomach. Black demon qi seeped out of the wound, and the incongruence Divine Mother seemed to have aged tremendously in an instant. This is too terrifying. Little junior brother is actually this terrifying when he's fighting with all his might. He was really putting on a show when he said he was in the alternate space. Looking at the terrifying wound on her body, the incongruence Divine Mother recalled how she was evenly matched with Guhan in the alternate space and immediately felt ashamed. She had always thought that the difference between her and Guhan was not that great, and that her master did not need to set so many traps to deal with Guhan. The reason why the incongruence Divine Mother cooperated with the Qingping Sword's plan and put on a show was entirely because of the Qingping Sword suppression. Therefore, the incongruence Divine Mother's resistance and disdain toward Guhan was particularly real when she was acting, because that was what she really thought. It was only now that the incongruence Divine Mother realized how wrong she was. She could not even withstand 3 strands of sword qi from Guhan, and yet she laughably thought that she could be evenly matched with Guhan, but 9th junior brother's strength is already close to the level of a sage. No, with his current state, I'm afraid that even the weakest sage, Goddess Nua, is no match for him. The incongruence Divine Mother thought to herself. Back in the myriad immortal formation, she had tried to challenge Goddess Nua, who was the weakest, to see the gap between her and a sage. In the end, the incongruence Divine Mother was defeated by Goddess Nua in just 5 moves. At that time, the huge gap made the incongruence Divine Mother feel disheartened. She lamented that the gap between a sage and a sage was like heaven and earth. But now, with just 3 strands of sword qi, she was already on the verge of death. The incongruence Divine Mother could not help but lament that Guhan's strength might have already reached the level of Goddess Nua in the past. Just as the incongruence Divine Mother was thinking about this, her pupils suddenly contracted. A strand of sword qi came at her with great force. It was so fast that she did not even have time to react. She could only watch as the sword qi slashed at her other arm, crippling both of her arms. "Master, save me." The incongruence Divine Mother was completely flustered. If another strand of sword qi came at her now, she would probably die. Therefore, the incongruent's divine mother could no longer care about anything else. She could only frantically seek help from the Grandmaster of Tongtian. Disciple, wait there for me to save you. Seeing that the incongruent's divine mother was severely injured, the Grandmaster of Tongtian looked anxious. Without saying a word, he began to rush toward the incongruent's divine mother. In order to reach the incongruent's divine mother as soon as possible, the Grandmaster of Tongtian did not even care about dodging along the way. After taking a dozen strands of fairy slaying sword chi head-on, he rescued the incongruent's divine mother to his side. After grabbing the incongruent's divine mother, the Grandmaster of Tongtian immediately said to her, "Hurry up and change back to your original form. Otherwise, even I won't be able to protect you." "Yes, Master." The incongruent's divine mother did not hesitate at all. After hearing the Grandmaster of Tongtian's order, her body immediately turned into a puff of smoke. When the smoke dissipated, the incongruent's divine mother's body was already gone. In its place was a small mountain hovering next to the Grandmaster of Tongtian's hand. The incongruent's divine mother's original form was the legendary Black Mountain. It was the first mountain formed naturally after Pangu split the world apart. Later on, it absorbed the spirit chi of the world and turned into a human form, which was how the incongruent's divine mother came to be. "Good disciple, I'll definitely save you." The Grandmaster of Tongtian stuffed the Black Mountain that the incongruent's divine mother had turned into his clothes. He then continued to fight the fairy slaying sword formation. The battle lasted for more than 10 minutes. Although the fairy slaying sword formation was unparalleled in power, it was naturally impossible to destroy the Grandmaster of Tongtian, who was a sage, in a short period of time. Even the few sages back then could not do it. In the end, the sages could only sacrifice themselves to seal the Grandmaster of Tongtian. "Guhan, you're here. That's great, I've finally found you." Song Ifei's excited voice was heard when Guhan was trying his best to kill the Grandmaster of Tongtian. "Why are you here?" Guhan asked when he saw Song Ifei. "When I saw all the monsters in the alternate space running out, I knew that the plan had begun. I've secretly followed those monsters to the Grandmaster of Tongtian's lair according to your plan. When I was about to save my master, I heard those monsters say that you're already dead. So I. Song Ifei's voice sounded like she was about to cry. "You silly girl, I won't die so easily." Guhan sighed. Song Ifei's master was already in front of him, but after hearing the news, she left her master behind and came to find him. Although this friendship touched Guhan very much, if Mingyuan Jendi knew about it, he might even want to kill Guhan. "Forget it, it's a good thing that you're here. I have no time to worry about the situation in Yangjing City now. I'll have to trouble you to go to the outskirts of Yangjing City and tell me how the war situation there is," Guhan immediately said to Song Ifei. In fact, Guhan's eyes were still paying attention to the situation in Yangjing City from time to time. However, Guhan was now hundreds of kilometers away from Yangjing City. Guhan could barely see that humans and Yuan Ku were still in a stalemate in the core area of Yangjing City. He knew nothing about the specific situation, so he could only ask Song Ifei to go and check it out. "Okay, be careful." Song Ifei nodded and went immediately. About 10 minutes later, she hurriedly ran back. When she was about to say something, she saw that Guhan was sweating profusely while controlling the immortal killing sword formation and the Grandmaster of Tongtian. She hesitated for a moment and said, "The situation is good. Lu Shihua and Liuonian Ling are in a stalemate with Yuan Ku. It should be no problem for them to hold on for another 1 or 2 hours. Tell me the truth." Seeing Song Ifei's little hesitation, how could Guhan not know what she was thinking? She was afraid that the bad news would distract him in the battle with the Grandmaster of Tongtian, so she deliberately hid the truth. Song Ifei was still hesitating whether to tell the truth to Guhan. "The extinction of all human beings is at this moment. You must tell me the truth. Otherwise, even if I defeat the Grandmaster of Tongtian, the human beings will be extinct. What's the point of this for me?" Ji Yuhan shouted to Song Ifei. Hearing this, Song Ifei's eyes became hot, and hot tears flowed down his cheeks. "In the end," he said, "the situation is very bad. Lu Shihua is about to die. The number of run-level bandits attacking Miss Linlin has increased to 5. More than half of the human swordbearers are dead or wounded. The city wall is covered in blood, and broken swords are everywhere. I estimate that in 20 minutes at most, I'm afraid the entire core area's defense line will. Okay. There's no need to say more. I already know. Guhan rudely interrupted Song Ifei's words. He took a deep look at the Grandmaster of Tongtian, who was surrounded by the immortal killing sword formation. Finally, he took a step forward and walked directly into the immortal killing sword formation. At the same time, he grabbed the wandering Qingpin sword. Master, let me deal with you personally. Guhan shouted. Okay, let me see what my disciple is capable of. Grandmaster of Tongtian also shouted. Although he was seriously injured at this time, he was still heroic. Chapter 1558. 9 Swords of Shentian, Sword Dipper. As soon as Guhan attacked, he directly used the killing move of the 9 Swords of Shentian. Song Ifei, who was watching from the side, did not even see what happened. In the next second, Guhan suddenly appeared beside sect leader Tongtian and stabbed the Qingpin sword into sect leader Tongtian's heart again. 9 Swords of Shentian. When he saw Jiyu Han using the 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven, sect leader Tongtian's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment. He used his hands to grab the impoverished sword in Jiyu Han's hands with his bare hands. Sword break. Seeing that the Qingpin sword was grabbed by sect leader Tongtian, Guhan's eyes flashed and he used another skill of the 9 Swords of Shentian. The Qingpin sword suddenly burst out with a sword sound. Sect leader Tongtian's face instantly changed and revealed a miserable expression. At the same time, he involuntarily let go of his hands, but before he let go, he pushed forward and finally pushed Guhan's body away. 9 Swords of Shentian. This is my eldest senior brother's swordsmanship. Why do you know my eldest senior brother's swordsmanship? After pushing Guhan away, sect leader Tongtian did not care about his bloody right hand at all. Instead, he directly asked such a question to Guhan. Please forgive me, master. Disciple forgot to tell master. Disciple doesn't only have you as a master, old Lord Taishang is also disciple's master, and he took disciple as a disciple decades before master. Jiyu Han honestly replied. Well, eldest senior brother is indeed my eldest senior brother. I always thought that I was the only one who buried a chess piece around you. I didn't expect that eldest senior brother also had a chess piece. Sect leader Tongtian sighed and immediately showed a disdainful expression. But my good disciple, my eldest senior brother is good at Zen and Taoism, but when it comes to swordsmanship, he is not even as good as a 3-year-old child. The swordsmanship he created is really not pleasing to the eye. It is not at the same level as my swordsmanship at all. Today, I'll teach you the orthodox sect of Jie school. As soon as sect leader Tongtian's voice faded, his bloody right hand suddenly reached into his bosom and pulled out a pale, bone-like long sword. 9 Death's lifeless sword. Seeing this long sword, Song Ifei was the first to let out a scream because he was too familiar with this sword. So, this sword is called the 9 Death's lifeless sword. I've never heard of this name before. It really isn't a good sword. Sect leader Tongtian naturally heard Song Ifei's words. He looked at the 9 Death's lifeless sword in his hand with an extremely disdainful expression and said, if it were not for the fact that I couldn't find a good sword, this piece of trash would not be worthy of my use. Alas, it's a pity that I don't have the Qingping sword, so I can only reluctantly use this piece of trash. Sect leader Tongtian sighed as if using the 9 Death's lifeless sword was a disgrace to his identity. Although the 9 Death's lifeless sword was not famous in Untainted Land, it was still an emperor sword lady. It was really pitiful that it was belittled by sect leader Tongtian. Don't insult my master's sword. Hearing sect leader Tongtian's insult, Song Ifei immediately shouted angrily. Then, he thought of something and hurriedly asked, Bastard, where did you take my master? Where is my master? Your master? Sect leader Tongtian said with a thoughtful expression, is she the human sword holder who was possessed by the fragment of my consciousness when I found my primordial spirit? That's her. What did you do to my master? Song Ifei asked excitedly. Originally, I planned to spare her life for the sake of her guarding my primordial spirit for hundreds of years. However, she's really too insensible. She actually dared to attack me, and even boldly left a scar on my body. How can I keep such a rebellious junior? But little girl, you can rest assured. That junior did not suffer too much before her death. I just extracted the fragment of her consciousness from her body, and she died because of the exhaustion of her lifespan. She died very peacefully, which could be considered a good end. Sect leader Tongtian said kindly. You bastard. You killed my master. I'm going to kill you. Song Yifei suddenly fell into a state of madness when she heard the news of Mingyuan Jiandi's death. Without saying anything, she picked up the sword lady in her hand and was ready to fight with sect leader Tongtian in the immortal killing sword formation. Get the hell back. Ji Han would let Song Yifei enter this dangerous battlefield. He controlled the two immortal slaying sword chi to strike Song Yifei's body and send him flying. At the same time, he said to Song Yifei, Yifei, calm down. Senior Ming Yuan's lifelong wish was to die as a normal human. Her greatest wish has been fulfilled. Don't be so impulsive. Although what Gu Han said was the hard truth, how could Song Yifei listen to it at this time? After being sent flying by Gu Han's immortal killing sword chi, she still wanted to rush into the immortal killing sword formation. In desperation, Gu Han directly knocked Song Yifei out with the immortal killing sword chi, and then threw her into the void to prevent her from spoiling his plan. What a good child who respects her master. She's much better than your unfilial disciple. Sect leader Tongtian said with admiration when he saw Song Yifei trying her best to avenge her master. Cut the crap. Give me your life. Gu Han snorted coldly and once again charged toward sect leader Tongtian with his sword. Forget it. I'll let you see the orthodox Jie School's trump card. It's the sword technique that killed Master Hong Jun back then. With the nine-death sword in hand, sect leader Tongtian's temperament changed instantly. His bloody body suddenly began to move, and a strong murderous aura enveloped him. This murderous aura was so strong that it was not inferior to the 4 immortal killing swords of the Supreme Master of the Killing Path. This is. Seeing sect leader Tongtian's state, Gu Han's right eyelid twitched involuntarily. Gu Han found sect leader Tongtian's state very familiar. Green lotus thorn. Pick. Drill. Then, sect leader Tongtian used a set of orthodox techniques of the Jie school that he mentioned. It seemed to be some very simple moves, such as simple stabbing, simple picking, and simple drilling. It was completely for beginners to learn, and it was the basic moves of the sword Dao. Such simple moves seemed to be extremely mysterious in sect leader Tongtian's hands. Even though Gu Han's swordsmanship had reached the peak, he still felt very tired when facing sect leader Tongtian's basic swordsmanship. No matter how exquisite Gu Han's swordsmanship was to fight back, sect leader Tongtian would dodge all of them. In the end, sect leader Tongtian would attack Gu Han's body, making Gu Han's body bleed. This was the first time that Gu Han was injured since he suddenly came out of the dimensional pocket. What kind of swordsmanship is this? After suffering 3 consecutive strikes from sect leader Tongtian, Gu Han had to take the initiative to distance himself from sect leader Tongtian. At the same time, he mobilized countless immortal killing sword chi to launch a tide-like attack at sect leader Tongtian. He also forcibly interrupted sect leader Tongtian's attack so that he could be in a safe position and have a chance to ask sect leader Tongtian. What? You want to learn? Let me teach you. Sect leader Tongtian said to Gu Han kindly, Good disciple, come here. I will teach you this swordsmanship step by step. No need. Gu Han curled his lips and said, Master, may I ask if this swordsmanship of yours is 3 green lotus swords? How do you know? Sect leader Tongtian was stunned. He was really stunned. Because while he was stunned, more than 10 immortal killing sword chi pierced into his body without any hindrance, leaving more than 10 wounds on his body. At the same time, sect leader Tongtian woke up from his stupor. The reason why sect leader Tongtian was in a daze was because this sword art was truly his most powerful sword art. Even his 8 inner disciples had never seen it before, let alone learning it. Ever since sect leader Tongtian researched this swordsmanship, it had been deeply hidden by him. Sect leader Tongtian was confident that even the other 6 sages did not know that he had a trump card called 3 green lotus swords. However, how on earth did Guhan know the name of such a swordsmanship that had been kept secret? Sect leader Tongtian could not help but ask Guhan again, "How on earth do you know the name of 3 green lotus swords? Tell me." "Haha, I not only know the name of 3 green lotus swords, I also know how to use it." Guhan smiled coldly. Then, his body began to move up and down, just like sect leader Tongtian's. An extremely strong killing intent surrounded Guhan's entire body. "How could you? Sect leader Tongtian was completely dumbfounded. He had never taught the 3 green lotus swords to anyone, so how could it be used by his greatest opponent, even though this greatest opponent was also his disciple? Could it be her? A person's figure suddenly flashed in sect leader Tongtian's mind. However, he did not have much time to think, because Guhan's next attack was like a surging tide. The reason why the green lotus 3 swords was so powerful was not because of the sword skill itself. In fact, the green lotus 3 swords itself did not contain any sword skills. The true strength of the green lotus 3 swords lay in the strengthening of the body, will, and soul. This was the true strength of the green lotus 3 swords. In the face of such a powerful blessing, any fancy sword skills were actually meaningless. Only the most basic sword movements could bring out the strongest effect. This was also the reason why sect leader Tongtian only used the basic sword skills. Previously, when Guhan used it, there were countless side effects. He even had to have intercourse before he could use the 3rd move of 3 green lotus swords. That was because this was a sword skill developed by sages for sages to use. For sages who had cut off the 3 separations and only had their true self, all kinds of side effects could not affect their true self. If Guhan wanted to use 3 green lotus swords before he became a sage, he would inevitably suffer from this problem. In fact, even though he had become an emperor sword level sword wielder, Guhan was still suffering from the side effects of 3 green lotus swords. "I have to finish this battle as soon as possible," Guhan said to himself again. Then, he fully activated the 3 swords of green lotus and clashed with sect leader Tongtian again. This time, sect leader Tongtian could no longer use the 3 swords of green lotus to gain the upper hand. Both of them could only rely on the simplest and most basic sword skills to fight. In this way, the 2 of them were evenly matched in terms of sword skills. "Good disciple, although I don't know where you learned 3 green lotus swords, it doesn't matter. I can still play with you for a few more days. But your human clansmen don't have much time left. If you don't help them, I'm afraid they will all die," sect leader Tongtian said with a sneer as he clashed with Guhan's sword light. Sect leader Tongtian's purpose was very simple. He wanted to distract Guhan and force Guhan to rush to Yangjing City to help human beings. Then, he could escape from the suppression of the fairy killing sword formation and escape. "I will save them, but before that, I will definitely kill you first," Guhan said with a fierce look in his eyes. At the same time, he stopped the basic sword skills in his hands. After distancing himself from sect leader Tongtian again, he said lightly, "The 9 swords of mysterious heaven is my master's sword skill, and the 3 green lotus swords is also my master's sword skill. Next, master, please experience the sword skill created by your disciple, which completely belongs to your disciple." When Guhan said this, Qingpin's sword could not help but emit a chaotic 5-colored light. Chapter 1559. Where did you learn this swordsmanship? With several bloody wounds on his body, sect leader Tongtian looked at Guhan in shock. At the same time, he asked Guhan in a voice that was squeezed out of his teeth, "Didn't I say that this is a swordsmanship I created myself?" Guhan said lightly, "Nonsense. This swordsmanship is so profound that it has even merged with the Great Way. How could it be created by a mere human like you?" Sect leader Tongtian gritted his teeth and said, "By the way, this must be my master's swordsmanship. My master created this swordsmanship and passed it to you later, right?" The master that sect leader Tongtian mentioned was, of course, ancestor Hongjun. Sect leader Tongtian's words also indicated that sect leader Tongtian couldn't create such a swordsmanship by himself. He could only use it on ancestor Hong Jun, who was much more powerful than him, to convince sect leader Tongtian. I created this swordsmanship myself. As for whether you believe it or not, I don't care. A cold light flashed in Guhan's eyes. Then, he said, I just showed you the first 5 moves of the chaos swordsmanship. There are a total of 7 moves in the chaos swordsmanship. Master, please try the 6th move. You. Even though sect leader Tongtian had cultivated for tens of millions of years, he could not help but feel frightened after hearing Guhan's words. Sect leader Tongtian could not bear the first 5 moves. He did not know whether he could handle it at all. But at this moment, sect leader Tongtian had no choice but to deal with it. He pulled himself together and used all his skills to the highest realm. He stared at the sword in Guhan's hand and was ready to receive Guhan's 6th move. However, in the next second, the Qingping sword, which had been in Tongtian's sight just now, suddenly disappeared from his sight. Tongtian entered a state of extreme vigilance. He wrapped himself with fragments of his consciousness and waited vigilantly for the Qingping sword, which might appear at any time. In the end, sect leader Tongtian waited for more than 10 seconds, but the sword did not disappear until the Qingping sword returned to Guhan's hand again. What's going on? Sect leader Tongtian was puzzled. The Qingping sword disappeared from Guhan's hand inexplicably and returned to Guhan's hand inexplicably for more than 10 seconds. Sect leader Tongtian could not believe it. Moreover, Guhan had just said that this was the 6th move of the chaos swordsmanship. With the first 5 moves as the foundation, sect leader Tongtian thought that the 6th move must be an extremely powerful swordsmanship. Unexpectedly, the whole process was so simple. What are you playing? Are you making fun of me? Sect leader Tongtian suddenly felt annoyed. Guhan was clearly making fun of him. He did not use the 6th move at all. He simply made the Qingping sword disappear to make fun of him. The Tongtian sect leader could not tolerate such a playful attitude. Master, you're too serious. I wouldn't dare to make fun of you even if I was 100 times more courageous. Guhan looked at the Qingping sword in his hand and said with a smile, Don't worry, master. That sword will arrive soon. What the hell is this? When sect leader Tongtian was still thinking about the meaning of this sentence, his body could not help but lean forward. His intact abdomen was torn open, and endless golden blood gushed out of the wound. Sect leader Tongtian was in a trance and directly knelt in the air. Sure enough, it will arrive soon. A wry smile flashed across sect leader Tongtian's face. He no longer had to think about what Ji Yuhan meant when she said she would be here soon, because the sword had already arrived. It crossed the distance of time and space and directly pierced through his abdomen. Your sword actually crossed the distance between time and space. Oh my God, is there such a swordsmanship in the world? Sect leader Tongtian murmured in disbelief. Guhan was right. Guhan had indeed stabbed the 6th move just now. However, the sword did not immediately stab sect leader Tongtian. Instead, it crossed the distance between time and space and finally fell on sect leader Tongtian more than 10 seconds later. This was also the reason why nothing happened when sect leader Tongtian saw Qingping's sword disappear and return. This was because the sword finally fell on him more than 10 seconds later. This caught sect leader Tongtian off guard and he took this fatal sword head-on. Crossing time and space was not a rare ability. Many Yuan Ku had this ability. In fact, if sect leader Tongtian wanted to, he could also let some people cross time and space to go to the past or the future. This was not impossible. However, it was different from the usual situation where the stronger one was, the easier it was to do it. The stronger one was, the harder it was to travel through time and space. With sect leader Tongtian's ability, it was very easy for him to send an ordinary human to the past or the future. However, if he wanted to send himself to the past or the future, it was impossible. Because to the entire world, traveling through time and space was something that broke the rules of the world. The world would instinctively resist such a thing from happening. If someone or something was forcefully sent to the past or the future, they would have to bear the backlash of the world. The strength of this backlash was determined by the strength of the person who traveled through time and space. The stronger a traveler was, the greater the counterforce of the world would be. If someone like sect leader Tongtian wanted to travel through time and space, he would have to bear the counterforce of the entire Great Way. If sect leader Tongtian could bear such a counterforce, he would be equivalent to an existence that had surpassed the Great Way. If the entire world was under his control, why would he need to travel through time and space? At this time, Guhan's strength was similar to that of sect leader Tongtian. In sect leader Tongtian's opinion, when Guhan crossed to the untainted world when he was an immortal sword, it was already the limit that the world could bear. Now that Guhan had reached the Emperor's sword level, it was absolutely impossible for him to cross time and space, not even for a minute or a second. How did Guhan's sword attack land on him after more than 10 seconds? Sect leader Tongtian looked deeply at Guhan. Although he did not ask this question, his eyes were full of doubt. People can't cross time and space, but sword principle can. Sword principle is the same as Great Tao. It exists eternally in all time and space. Facing sect leader Tongtian's doubt, Guhan answered very calmly as if he was talking about something as simple as eating and drinking. It seems that your cultivation in sword principle has really surpassed me. Sect leader Tongtian trembled violently when he heard Guhan's words. Then, he quickly calmed down and looked at Guhan calmly. Thank you for your praise, Master. In that case, please show me the last move of Chaos Sword Principle. Guhan shook the Qingpin sword in his hand again. You actually have a last move. Sect leader Tongtian was stunned. This sword that crossed time and space was already the limit of sword principle that sect leader Tongtian could imagine. At this moment, if sect leader Tongtian was asked to imagine the last sword strike of a higher realm, he really could not guess what was contained in the last sword strike given his profound knowledge and amazing realm. However, there was one thing that sect leader Tongtian was sure of. Once Guhan used this sword, it was very likely that he would die here. Good disciple, you're very good. However, I'm a little unwell now. Let me have a taste of this sword in the future, sect leader Tongtian said. Obviously, sect leader Tongtian had made up his mind to escape from here. He did not want to fight with Guhan anymore. However, he was still firmly sealed by the immortal killing sword formation. How could sect leader Tongtian escape? Master, you'd better not waste your time. You know the power of the immortal killing sword formation as well as I do. It's impossible for you to escape from it, Guhan said very confidently. Haha, the immortal killing sword formation is indeed powerful, but it depends on who is using it. If I control the immortal killing sword formation in my peak state, I don't think I can escape from it. However, if it's just you, a kid who hasn't become a sage, there's still a chance as long as you're willing to sacrifice yourself, sect leader Tongtian said lightly. Oh no. Hearing sect leader Tongtian's words, Guhan's expression changed instantly. He no longer wanted to act tough. Once again, he attacked sect leader Tongtian with the Qingpin sword in his hand. However, this time, sect leader Tongtian did not plan to resist at all. Instead, he took out a small mountain from his sleeve. It was the original form of Li Mountain that goddess Wudang had transformed into. Master, have you defeated that evil disciple? When goddess Wudang found out that she was taken out by sect leader Tongtian again, she thought that sect leader Tongtian had already killed Guhan and took her out. However, when goddess Wudang opened her eyes, she found that she was still in the immortal killing sword formation. Sect leader Tongtian was seriously injured, but Guhan seemed to be intact. She was a little confused and did not know why sect leader Tongtian took her out at this time. Good disciple, this is a fake world after all. There's no need for you to stay in this world. Before goddess Wudang could understand the meaning of sect leader Tongtian's words, she felt a huge force being injected into her body out of thin air. If it was in normal times, goddess Wudang would be ecstatic when a large amount of force was injected into her body because it meant that her strength would increase greatly. However, once the power surpassed the limits of what the goddess of incongruence could endure, it was like pouring a raging river into a small stream. The goddess of incongruence was destined to meet a tragic end. Even at the moment of her death, she did not know what had happened. She was blasted apart by the violent power. Including her origin soul, all traces of her existence exploded at that moment. The power of a flood-level Yuan Ku's self-explosion caused by a massive amount of external force was extremely terrifying. Even the immortal killing sword formation began to shake violently under such a terrifying self-explosion. In the end, a gap was torn open. At the same time, the moment this gap appeared, sect leader Tongtian seized the opportunity. He risked taking another sword strike from Guhan and escaped from the gap. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. Given sect leader Tongtian's ability, if he wanted to find a place to hide, Guhan would not be able to find him even if he tore the entire earth apart. Chapter 1560. Did I let him escape after all? Guhan frowned and sighed as he looked at the god-killing sword formation, which was now empty except for the extremely violent energy of the self-explosion. Guhan, let me out. I want to kill him. At this time, Guhan heard the crazy cry in the void. Guhan moved his mind and released Song Efei, who was attacking the void crazily, by Guhan. I want to kill him. Kill him. Song Efei, who had just run out, wanted to enter the immortal killing sword formation again. However, Ji Yuhan grabbed his shoulder and said, "That's enough. Take a closer look. Sect leader Tongtian is no longer in the immortal killing sword formation. If you rush in, you will only be killed by the violent energy inside." Guhan said to Song Efei. "Where did he go? You have killed him, right? You have avenged Master, right?" After Song Efei found that sect leader Tongtian had indeed disappeared in the god-killing sword formation, she immediately grabbed Guhan's collar excitedly and looked at Guhan expectantly. She hoped that Guhan could give her the answer she wanted. "No, he is not dead. He has escaped." Unfortunately, Guhan finally gave Song Efei a disappointing answer. "I know." Song Efei took a deep look at Guhan and then walked away. "I know where his lair is. Sect leader Tongtian must have escaped back to his lair. I will go to his lair to catch him now." "Don't go." Guhan grabbed Song Efei back and slapped her face without hesitation. Song Efei was stunned. If sect leader Tongtian is still in his so-called lair, I, Guhan, will cut off my head for you to kick as a ball. The most important thing now is to save Yangjing City. Follow me. Under Guhan's domineering slap and order, Song Efei stayed where he was for a long time, and finally followed Guhan obediently. When people lose their rationality, they need someone else to give them a strong method of control. Otherwise, they will only harm others and themselves in the end. Lu Shihua, you'd better surrender obediently. There's no hope for you humans anymore. Yuan Ku, whose entire body was shrouded in black qi, spoke to Lu Shihua in a hoarse voice that carried an aura of death. His name was Satan, and he was one of the highest commanders in the Western magical beast camp. He was a desolate level Yuan Ku. In addition, 2 other desolate level Yuan Ku followed Satan. 3 desolate level Yuan Ku besieged Lu Shihua at the same time. Although Lu Shihua resisted with all his strength, he was still no match for these 3 experts. Soon, he was in great danger. The energy of his protective shield had been reduced to less than 10%. Lu Shihua's protective shield would probably be broken if the opponent used another wave of the power of rules. "No, we still have hope." In the face of Satan's persuasion, Lu Shihua replied firmly without any hesitation. "Hope? Are you talking about Liuanian Ling?" Satan looked at the other side of the battlefield. Compared to Satan, that side of the battlefield was the real battlefield. There were only 3 desolate level Yuan Ku on Satan's side, but there were 6 desolate level Yuan Ku on Satan's side, and 3 of them were desolate level Yuan Ku. In terms of strength alone, the strength gathered on the other battlefield was 3 times that of Satan's. That was the battlefield that determined the fate of mankind. Liuanian Ling, your Liuanian clan is really powerful. I will never forget the scars your ancestor left on me. However, your Liuanian clan will end today. Let your Liuanian clan be buried in this city together with mankind. On that battlefield, the leader was an emperor who wore a golden dragon robe and had a glazed crown on his head. He held a luxurious golden long sword in his hand as he spoke coldly to Fleeting Ling. If one were to look closely, they would discover that the sword in this man's hand was exactly the same as the one in Fleeting Ling's hand. This sword was called the Firmament Emperor's Sword. It was the sword of the Jade Emperor, the supreme supremacy of the Haotian Golden Palace. It was also the sword of the Jade Emperor standing in front of Liuanian Ling. At this moment, the two masters of this sword were finally fighting face to face. Jade Emperor, why are you wasting your breath on this woman? Don't let me kill her. I can see that her blood is the blood of a virgin. This is the most delicious food in the world. A naked, crimson woman with a pair of wings that belonged to an unknown race spoke to fleeting Time Ling with a lewd smile on her face. Amaterasu, the Liuanian clan is a hero of mankind. Don't you dare insult her. Unexpectedly, the other desolate level Yuan Ku stood on Liuanian Ling's side and berated the leader of the Fusang celestial system, Amaterasu God, on behalf of Liuanian Ling. Then, this person said to Liuanian Ling with a benevolent expression, "After we kill you, we will bury you according to the etiquette of nobles. You can go in peace." TSK, TSK. Gongsun Shenyuan, what Caillou said back then was right. You are indeed a hypocritical villain. Ha ha ha, but I like it. After we finish eating these humans, do you want to come to my Takamagahara? I will let you experience the true beauty of a woman, Amaterasu God said in a hoarse voice. Coupled with her extremely ugly appearance, anyone who saw her would probably vomit their last night's meal. Even looking at such a woman was the most unbearable thing in the world, let alone having sex with her. Alright, then I will go to Lady Amaterasu's Takamagahara for a chat, Gongsun Shenyuan said with a smile, as if he didn't mind Amaterasu God's extremely ugly appearance at all. Shameless. Liuanian Ling couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood when she heard these three people's words. At the same time, she tightened her grip on the hilt of the Emperor Sword of Firmament. You still want to fight? Seeing Liuanian Ling's actions, Gongsun Shenyuan frowned and said, Your Liuanian family's billion sword technique is indeed powerful, but you are not Fleeting Time Calendar. You can't use the power of Fleeting Time Calendar. Moreover, even if Fleeting Time Calendar is reborn, he can't face the six of us at the same time. He can only rely on your dimensional barrier to resist. To tell you the truth, the six of us have only used 30% of our strength up until now, and you are already heavily injured. What makes you think you can continue fighting against the six of us? Hee hee. That's right. If I use this Emperor Sword of Firmament, I am indeed no match for the six of you. Hearing Gongsun Xuanyuan's words, Liuanian Ling smiled bitterly, but she loosened her grip on the hilt of the Emperor Sword of Firmament. Have you finally decided to accept your fate? Seeing Liuanian Ling's actions, Gongsun Shenyuan, who thought that she had already given up, suddenly had a change of expression. This was because after putting down the Emperor Sword of Firmament, Liuanian Ling actually took out another sword lady. However, compared to the Emperor Sword of Firmament, this sword lady was only a famed sword. But because of this sword lady, Gongsun Xuanyuan's expression became even more terrified than when he saw the Emperor Sword of Firmament. This is the 3-foot sword. This is the human path sword lady's 3-foot sword. What? This is the 3-foot sword? F***ck, she actually took out this freak. Hearing the fame of the 3-foot sword, the 6 prehistoric Yuan Ku were all shocked. After a few months, the details of the battle between the humans and the 12 Zhu Wus had spread throughout the Yuan Ku world. The story of Liuanian Ling wielding the 3-foot sword and activating her human path power killing the 12 Zhu Wus one by one deeply shocked the Yuan Ku world. Everyone, attack. Don't hold back anymore. We must kill this woman immediately. Otherwise, if the 3-foot sword continues to display its might, considering the hundreds of millions of lives below, I'm afraid that some of the 6 of us will die here. In fact, there was no need for Gongsun Shenyuan to say anything. The others also understood this. The human path sword lady was the last trump card of the humans. If they were not careful, the prehistoric Yuan Kus, who were usually immortal, might really die in this damned place. However, the Yuan Kus were also aware that once the humans used the human path sword lady, it meant that the humans' last moment had arrived. The humans had been forced into a hopeless situation, and this was their last trump card. Once the human path sword lady was destroyed, the extinction of the human race would be unstoppable. The entire human race would be destroyed by their own hands. The war between the humans and the Yuan Kus that had lasted for thousands of years would finally come to an end. I don't know how many Yuan Kus I can drag down with me before I die. It's a pity that the youth that Guhan gave me with great difficulty will be wasted by me again. Liuanian Ling controlled the 3-foot sword to absorb human life force while resisting the attacks of the 6 prehistoric Yuan Kus with great difficulty. At this moment, the only thing in Liuanian Ling's mind was Guhan's image. Apart from that, she had nothing else. Cloud-cast iron. My cloud-cast iron. On top of the city wall, Song Hammer let out a blood-curdling scream. The sword lady, whom he loved dearly and regarded as his bosom friend, had finally fallen in front of him. He could only watch as she smiled at him for the last time. Then, she was pressed under the body of the violent Yuenko, about to be broken into several pieces. Who can save the cloud-cast iron? I need help here. I need help here. Song Hammer shouted loudly. At the same time, he looked around, hoping that the surrounding sword-bearers could help him. In the end, there were less than 10% of the humans left on the city wall. The ground was covered in blood, and only a few kittens and puppies were struggling on the city wall. Humans are destined to perish. After Song Hammer discovered this painful fact, he became abnormally calm. He silently picked up a broken sword that only had half of it left. This was his spirit sword grade sword maiden, and also the first sword maiden that he had broken. You sons of B** keys, Yuan Kus. I'll kill you all. Song Hammer let out a furious roar. Then, holding the broken sword, he directly pounced on a nearby Yuan Ku's body and used all his strength to stab the broken sword into the opponent's body. Awoo! This Yuan Ku let out a cry of pain. He didn't think that those cowardly humans who could only hide behind the sword ladies would actually dare to jump out and take the initiative to fight back. As a result, this unlucky Yuan Ku died under Song Hammer's broken sword. However, this seemed to be Song Hammer's final moment. Following the angry roars of the surrounding Yuan Kus, 4 or 5 Yuan Kus simultaneously pounced on Song Hammer, intending to tear him into pieces. Is today the end of my life? If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have been so distracted when I was learning the sword with Guhan. This was Song Hammer's final thought as he sensed his limbs being gnawed off by Yuenko and felt his heart being dug out. Chapter 1561. What are you thinking about? Do you really want to die? The dying Song Hammer barely heard a familiar voice. Then, she saw the ferocious Yuan Ku turn into nothingness in an instant. These Yuan Kus were like water vapor, like a mirage. They all dissipated in a breath's time. Jiyu Han. No. His Majesty Hong Jun. When Song Hammer saw a blurry figure, his mind was completely cut off, and he fainted. Sigh, I've dragged it out for too long. Guhan carefully put the last bit of Song Hammer's body into the Immortal Sword Medical Pod. With the Immortal Sword Medical Pod and Guhan, Song Hammer could come back to life as long as there was a little bit of her soul left. Therefore, Guhan was not worried about Song Hammer's life. However, there were too many sword bearers who had encountered the same fate as Song Hammer. After Yuan Ku's death, their bodies would disappear from this world. However, after the sword bearers died, their corpses would be left in this world. Their blood would also stain the walls of Yangjing City. Therefore, when Guhan looked around, he saw mutilated corpses of humans lying on the ground, staring at the sky with soulless eyes. The entire walls were stained with red blood. It's terrible, it's really terrible. Song Ifei, who had climbed up the city wall after Guhan, was stunned when she saw everything. Then, she could not help but cover her mouth and vomit. Song Ifei had seen death before. She had seen many, many battles over the years. However, this was the first time in her life that she had seen such a tragic scene. Song Ifei could not help but vomit. There are humans here. Kill them. When the hundreds of Yuan Kus realized that 2 humans had suddenly appeared on the city wall, they immediately charged over aggressively with their claws and fangs bared. Among these Yuan Kus, there were powerful dragon-level Yuan Kus, the weakest mouse-level Yuan Kus, and even 1 or 2 nether-level Yuan Kus. Therefore, these hundreds of Yuan Kus naturally thought that they could easily kill these 2 humans who had suddenly appeared, just like what they had done before. These Yuan Kus, who seemed very powerful in the eyes of most sword-bearers, were just a joke to Guhan. With a wave of his hand, a wave of sword chi swept past, and these aggressive Yuan Kus dissipated like mist. Only the dimensional vortex still proved that they once existed. Although these hundreds of Yuan Kus were easily killed by Guhan, it was just a drop in the bucket. There were at least 100,000 Yuan Kus on the city wall, and below the city wall, endless Yuan Kus were still climbing up. A rough estimate showed that there were at least 3 million Yuan Kus under the city wall, ready to go. For humans, this was a number that was impossible to defeat. Guhan, let's do it. Kill all these guys. Song Ifei was already done. Her body was burning with anger, and she was ready to kill these damn Yuan Kus. Wait. Guhan stopped Song Ifei, who was ready to rush up and fight with the Yuan Kus, and sighed. You're just an immortal sword wielder now. Even if your strength is superior, how many can you kill in the face of millions of Yuan Kus? What do you mean by that? Do you think I'll just stand by and watch? Song Ifei said, gritting his teeth. Of course not. I have a better way to deal with these damn beasts. A cold light flashed in Guhan's eyes, and this cold light made Song Ifei feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. These Yuan Kus are finished. They're all dead. Song Ifei looked around at the densely packed Yuan Kus, who were still showing off and thinking that they had won. He muttered to himself, as if these Yuan Kus would all die in an instant. Luckily, the quantum network is still working. Guhan looked down at his personal terminal, and when he saw that the quantum signal bar was still full, he smiled viciously. Everyone, hold on. Don't break away from the formation. Everyone, hold on. Our loved ones are right behind us. We can't take a step back, the sword immortal of the Gui Hall yelled at the people around him. Actually, even without the sword immortal of Gui Hall's encouragement, these swordsmen wouldn't retreat. This was because they had nowhere else to go. If they retreated now, the entire human race would perish, and they would die as well. Only 1,000 people left. Sigh, I wonder how many of these 1,000 people will make it back alive. The sword immortal of Gui Hall sighed as he looked at the swordsman below him while he fought with a few universe-grade Yuan Kus. At this time, the human defense line that covered the entire city wall had collapsed. The remaining swordsmen could only form small areas on the city wall with the sword immortal level bearers as the core. These were the last areas on the city wall that were occupied by humans. With the sword immortal level bearers doing their best to resist and protect the humans, the remaining swordsmen were barely able to maintain their defense line. There were more than 20 areas on the city wall with sword immortal level bearers as the core, and each area had about 1,000 sword immortal level bearers. These were the last remaining swordsmen of the human race, and there were less than 20,000 of them in total. Apart from these sword-bearers, there were still sword-bearers like Song Hammer who could not find the protection of an immortal sword-wielding sword-bearer, but the number of such sword-bearers was too small, and they were constantly dying off. Soon, there were only 20 or so immortal sword-wielding sword-bearers left on the city walls. However, this was also only temporary, because every sword immortal level bearer was simultaneously attacked by a few or even a dozen universe-grade Yuan Kus. These sword immortal level bearers might not even be able to last 10 minutes. In fact, in just a short 3 minutes, the sword immortal of Gui Hall's personal terminal had already received the final wills of 8 sword immortal level bearers. The publication of these wills represented the death of these sword immortal level bearers. With the death of the sword immortal level bearers, it was only a matter of time before all the human sword immortal level bearers died. In fact, it was only a matter of time before all the sword immortal level bearers died. Take the sword immortal of Gui Hall for example. There was less than 10% of the sword essence left in his body. According to his own estimation, under the most optimistic circumstances, he could only last for another 2 minutes. Alright, I'll be able to see my father in 2 minutes. The sword immortal of Gui Hall thought to himself. At this moment, he had no hesitation. Beep beep beep. At this moment, the sword immortal of Gui Hall's personal terminal started beeping again. This kind of beeping made the sword immortal of Gui Hall feel extremely annoyed. In the past, when this beeping sound was heard, It meant that a sword immortal level bearer had written a will and left this world forever. It seemed that another sword immortal level bearer had left this world. Although he was extremely unwilling to see such a will, the sword immortal of Gui Hall finally took the time to look at his personal terminal. It only took one look. Just one look, and the sword immortal of Gui Hall's entire temperament instantly underwent a huge change. His original temperament of fighting to the death disappeared without a trace in an instant. In its place was a joyful temperament, a joy that was filled with sunshine. This kind of joy even affected the other sword immortal level bearers who were protected by the sword immortal level bearers. This was because the change in the sword immortal of Gui Hall was too great. They could not help but notice the huge change in the sword immortal of Gui Hall's emotions. What's happening? Is there some good news? Just as this thought popped up in everyone's mind, the sword immortal of Gui Hall shouted in the air, "All sword maidens on the perimeter, enter defensive mode. Do not let a single Yuan Ku enter our defensive line. All sword immortal level bearers who have lost their sword maidens but are still in good condition, please help up your injured and immobile companions immediately. Pick up all the broken swords you have collected and prepare to retreat through the gate of the void." The sword immortal of Gui Hall spoke very quickly and loudly. His instructions were also very clear. Therefore, all the sword immortal level bearers immediately knew the sword immortal of Gui Hall's order to retreat. However, everyone could not help but feel puzzled. What was going on? Why were they retreating? Where could the humans retreat to? With this question in mind, one of the sword immortal level bearers immediately asked, "Sword immortal of Gui Hall, please tell us. What are we talking about? If we retreat, what about the hundreds of millions of our people behind us?" "That's right. If we retreat, what about our people?" Everyone asked the same question. If it were not for the sake of protecting the humans behind them, many of the sword immortal level bearers would have chosen to escape. It was precisely because of the existence of these humans that they needed to protect that these sword immortal level bearers were willing to sacrifice themselves to fight. These humans had become the core of the sword immortal level bearers' belief in continuing to fight, and they were willing to sacrifice their lives for this. However, at this moment, the sword immortal of Gui Hall was asking them to retreat. What about their people behind them? Were they going to let Yuan Ku kill them? There's no time to talk. Retreat now. The sword immortal of Gui Hall did not explain. Instead, he directly opened a void door in the center of the area. To the sword immortal of Gui Hall, this was already an overload. Under normal circumstances, a sword immortal level sword immortal would need to expend a lot of energy to open a void door. At this moment, the sword immortal of Gui Hall was fighting with 4 or 5 universe realm Yuan Ku at the same time. 90% of his energy was used to deal with what was happening on the battlefield. Being able to use 10% of his energy to open a void door was already an overload. Therefore, the sword immortal of Gui Hall did not have the energy to explain anything to these sword immortals. He could only ask them to quickly retreat through the void door. "We're not leaving. We're going to die here." "That's right. Sword immortal of Gui Hall, leave if you're afraid. We're going to live and die with our people. My parents are right behind me. I'm not leaving." Countless sword immortals shouted loudly. This was a very touching scene. In the face of a life and death crisis, so many sword immortals actually expressed in unison that they would rather give up their lives to protect their people behind them. This was indeed a very noble spirit that was worthy of praise and praise at any time. However, at this moment, this became a very bad thing. Faced with the crowd that was unwilling to enter the void door, the sword immortal of Gui Hall was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of black blood. He was attacked by the enemy Yuan Ku a few more times. Finally, he shouted with the last of his energy, "You don't believe me, but do you not believe His Majesty Hong Jun?" Chapter 1562. His Majesty Hong Jun? What? Is this an order from His Majesty Hong Jun? That's great. Is His Majesty Hong Jun finally back? After hearing the sword immortal of Ming Hall's words, the crowd that had been resisting entering the void gate finally loosened up. The sword bearers who had lost their sword maidens were the first to carry the wounded and enter the void gate. This became a signal for more and more sword-bearers to follow them into the Void Gate. The area controlled by the humans gradually shrank. In the end, when 90% of the humans had entered the Void Gate, the Sword Immortal of Ming Hall unleashed his ultimate move. He used his immense strength to temporarily force the surrounding Yuan Ku to retreat. He then dragged the remaining sword-bearers who were still resisting outside and escaped into the Void Gate. This did not only happen in the area controlled by the Sword Immortal of Ming Hall. In fact, all the sword-bearers received an order from the same person at the same time. Then, all the sword-bearers opened the Void Gate at the same time and ordered their sword-bearers to retreat into it. Some of the sword-bearers entered without hesitation, but there were also some who questioned him, like the Sword Immortal of Gui Hall. In the end, they were silenced by Hongjuan's name and obediently entered the Gate of the Void. It was not only the immortal sword-wielders who were experiencing such a situation. The same thing was happening to the other sword-wielders who were still fighting. Leslie Dracula was a genius from the same generation as Guhan. She was a genius who had feelings for Guhan and dreamed of marrying Guhan one day. After Guhan disappeared, her immature feelings for Guhan were naturally put aside. In the end, she found an honest, reliable, and humorous man who looked similar to Guhan. They ended up having an adorable child. Unfortunately, all of these things were gone 3 years ago. Leslie Dracula was one of the last sword-bearers to retreat from Buenos Aires. She chose to fight until the end to buy enough time for her husband and child to escape. However, when Leslie Dracula finally escaped to London, she was heartlessly told that the ship her husband was on had been discovered by the Grand Wizard Shenming, who was passing by. All the humans on the ship, including the 5 true dragons of the Dragon Clan who were escorting the ship, had died at the hands of the Grand Wizard Shenming. Not a single one of them had survived. From that day on, Leslie Dracula seemed to have lost the vitality of a living person and became like a puppet. When Zhu Wu was around, she would kill Zhu Wu with all her might. When Zhu Wu was not around, she would vent her anger on Yuan Ku. It was the same in this battle. Leslie Dracula lost herself in the battle. She did not care about her back or whether she was in a trap. She just kept killing Yuan Ku. Perhaps it was because of this desperate fighting style that Leslie Dracula survived until now. The rest of the sword-bearers around her had become a pile of minced meat on the ground. However, Leslie Dracula's good luck ended here. After killing all the sword-bearers around her, the remaining Yuan Ku focused all his firepower on Leslie Dracula. Leslie Dracula was only a spirit sword-bearer at this time, and the sword essence in her body had been exhausted. Therefore, even though she was full of anger, and even though Leslie Dracula's will was not weak, she was still pounced on by Yuan Ku, just like Song Hammer just now. However, Leslie Dracula was much luckier than Song Hammer. Song Hammer was bitten by Yuan Ku until only half of her body was left. However, when Leslie Dracula's body was about to be torn to pieces by Yuan Ku, all the Yuan Ku around her disappeared like mist. Then, a hand appeared from the void and directly drilled into the void. "Darling, I see you again." Looking at the face in front of her, which was 40 to 50% similar to her husband's, Leslie Dracula said without emotion. At this time, Guhan did not care who Leslie Dracula mistook him for. After saving Leslie Dracula, he immediately rushed to the next location and directly dragged the sword-bearers who were fighting alone there into the void. In addition to Guhan, Song Ifei was also doing the same thing. After ensuring that the sword-bearers they were responsible for protecting had entered the void, the immortal sword-bearers immediately dispersed and, like Guhan and Song Ifei, dragged the scattered sword-bearers who were still fighting on the city wall into the void. With the addition of more than 20 immortal sword-bearers, the remaining sword-bearers on the wall soon disappeared from Yuan Ku's sight. The city wall, which the Yuan Ku had been fighting hard for more than 20 minutes, was finally completely under Yuan Ku's control at this moment. The Yuan Ku could finally look below the other side of the city wall, where hundreds of millions of delicious humans were tempting their taste buds. Very good. At the same time, on a higher level of the battlefield, Gongsun Shenyuan received the report from his subordinates immediately. He smiled at Liunian Ling and said, "Miss Ling, it seems that you humans are finished. The entire city wall has been occupied by us, and the rest are just a bunch of live targets. Miss Ling, we have one. Liuyan Ling did not say anything. She just lowered her head and glanced at the city wall. She found that all the human territories that were barely holding on had disappeared without a trace. The entire city wall area had indeed been occupied by Yuan Ku. Seeing this, Liuyan Ling felt her head turn black. Before she could catch her breath, the two Yuan Ku around her seized the opportunity to attack Liuyan Ling's personal shield fiercely, causing Liuyan Ling's personal shield to tremble. I'll fight you to the death. Seeing that the city wall had been completely lost, Liuyan Ling, who thought that humans had reached the end of the road and could no longer be saved, finally decided to use her own life to sing a final sad song for humans. She, Liuyan Ling, did not want this life anymore. She must drag a few Yuan Ku down with her. Just as Liuyan Ling had this thought in her mind, her personal terminal sounded a melodious sound. Apart from the standard beeping sound, the personal terminal could also be set to different caller tones for different people. This melodious sound belonged to a voice that had a special place in Liuyan Ling's address book. He's finally back. Liuyan Ling's heart warmed up. She immediately looked at her personal terminal. Then, she felt refreshed in an instant. She had already taken out the 3-foot sword, but at this moment, she put it back. No. This woman isn't right. Gongsun Shenyuan keenly sensed the change in Liuyan Ling, but he did not have time to carefully think about why Liuyan Ling would change like this. At this moment, in the last area of the core area of Yangjing City, huge void doors the size of city walls opened at the same time. If this was the first time this void gate appeared, any human who saw it would definitely feel doubtful and fearful instinctively. Even if Yuenko's butcher's knife was right in front of them, they might not be able to get through the gate in such a neat and tidy manner. But fortunately, this was not the first time these huge void doors had appeared. 3 months ago, these void doors had also appeared. Then, all the survivors spent the safest period of their lives in these void doors. The memories of these void doors were still fresh in the minds of humans. Therefore, without any hesitation or even without Guhan taking the initiative to give the order, the survivors rushed into the void doors in unison after seeing these void doors. Without any hesitation, 200 million humans rushed into the void doors like a tide. In less than a minute, all the survivors in the entire core area except for a few individuals had disappeared in the core area. At this moment, the first wave of Yuan Ku rushed down from the city wall. They, who were about to start a massacre, looked at the empty core area blankly. They had no idea what was going on here. What is this? How can there be such a huge void door? This is impossible. Gongsun Xuanyuan's jaw dropped when he saw the scene before him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. In fact, it was not just Shu Gongsun Shenyuan. All the Yuan Ku, including the prehistoric ones, were dumbfounded at this scene. I remember now. According to Chen Liyang's report, these huge void doors appeared during the Battle of the 12 Zuwu in Yuzhong City. This is that man's unique skill. That man has returned. The Jade Emperor suddenly shouted. At this moment, another small void door opened directly above the core area. Under the gaze of all the prehistoric Yuan Ku, a man walked out of this void door. At the same time, 4 long swords shining with golden light floated to Guhan's side. In the enclosed area formed by these 4 long swords, rays of colorful light were constantly colliding with each other as if some ferocious beast was imprisoned by these 4 long swords. What's going on? Didn't the Tongtian saint promise us that Guhan will definitely die in his hands? Gongsun Shenyuan screamed in disbelief. You have really become the lackeys of the Tongtian saint. Upon hearing Gongsun Xuanyuan's words, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Guhan's mouth. But it doesn't matter. These are gifts from the Tongtian saint. Now, I will give them to you. Chapter 1563. What gift? Before Gongsun Shenyuan could react to what was happening, Guhan snapped his fingers and the 4 celestial executioners' 4 swords behind him dispersed. The moment the immortal killing sword formation formed by the 4 immortal killing swords, Incongruence Divine Mother, the desolate level Yuan Bandit, self-detonated under the infusion of Saint's power by Tongtian sect. She had been trapped by the immortal killing sword formation. If one had to describe the power of the explosion, it would be equivalent to the explosion of a dozen big Ivan bundling together. It was undoubtedly an extremely terrifying power. The huge power instantly hit every prehistoric level Yuan-Ku. The moment these Yuan-Ku sensed the power, they revealed expressions of extreme horror. Without saying a word, they tried to open the void door and enter the void to avoid the huge power. However, when these unlucky Yuan-Ku tried to open the void door, they were horrified to find that no matter how they communicated with the void, which could have been easily opened in the past, was now tightly shut. It was as solid as the door of a bank vault. No matter how hard they tried, the void remained firmly fixed and motionless, not giving them a chance to open it at all. That's impossible. That human just opened such a huge void gate so easily. The universe-level Yuan-Ku shouted in their hearts. However, shouting was of no use. They could only watch helplessly as the shockwave produced by the explosion of the sword formation engulfed their bodies. This guy has actually grasped the laws of the void. The universe-level Yuan-Ku did not understand why the void door could not be opened, but the prehistoric-level Yuan-Ku immediately knew the problem. Someone had completely grasped the laws of the void and sealed the void firmly. Unless they could also grasp the laws of the void, they would not be able to open the void door and enter the void to avoid the shocking explosion. Unfortunately, none of the prehistoric-level Yuan-Ku had grasped the laws of the void. Therefore, the prehistoric-level Yuan-Ku could only fully activate their defensive means and use their own power to resist the huge explosion. Fortunately, such an explosion was ultimately only a prehistoric-level Yuan-Ku's explosion. Even though it was infused with sage power, it was still a prehistoric-level explosion. As such, the primitive-grade Yuanko was able to resist the power of the explosion with all his might, preventing himself from suffering any fatal damage until the explosion's energy dissipated. However, the other Yuanko were not so lucky. When Gongsun Shenyuan felt that the energy outside had weakened to a safe level, he immediately activated his shield and looked down nervously. Although he had already expected this outcome, when the real scene appeared in front of his eyes, Gongsun Shenyuan still felt a heart-wrenching despair. At this moment, in Gongsun Shenyuan's eyes, the entire Yangjing city no longer existed. What replaced it was a huge crater that was tens of kilometers deep. This huge crater completely enveloped the original location of Yangjing city. It was so large that it could be seen clearly even from outer space. If the Earth was compared to a human face, then this huge crater would probably be a black mole on the face. Even from a distance of hundreds of meters, one could still see it clearly. If the entire Yangjing city was like this, then there was no need to talk about Yuan-Ku who stayed in Yangjing city. Judging from the power of such a huge explosion, any Yuan-Ku below the universe level would definitely not be able to survive such a huge explosion. As for the universe level Yuan-Ku, Gongsun Shenyuan looked around. Other than the prehistoric level Yuan-Ku in the sky, there were no other Yuan-Ku. Of course, it was impossible for all the universe-level Yuan-Ku to die. Perhaps some Yuan-Ku were lying at the bottom of the crater, moaning and dying. Our martyr's palace, millions of troops, are gone. Gongsun Shenyuan's expression was ashen. In order to completely wipe out the humans this time, the martyr's palace had used all of its trump cards. The millions of Yuan-Ku under Pearl River pictures had all been brought outside Yangjing city. However, with this explosion, they were instantly annihilated. Such a huge loss was something the Martyr's Palace had never experienced in the past 1,000 years. These were the absolute elites of the Martyr's Palace. How many people are left in the Martyr's Palace? Gongsun Shenyuan couldn't help but ask himself this question, but he could only come up with a pitiful answer. After this battle, the Martyr's Palace might be able to gather a few million more Yuan-Ku, but most of them were rat or tiger level Yuan-Ku. Excluding the trash Yuan-Ku, the remaining dragon level and above Yuan-Ku numbered less than 10,000. 90% of the Martyr's Palace's high-end power had been completely destroyed in this explosion. How could Gongsun Shenyuan not feel despair? Gongsun Shenyuan wasn't the only one who felt despair. Amaterasu, Satan, and the Jade Emperor had all rushed here with their elite forces. Under the temptation of Tongtian's assurance that they could kill Guhan, They had wanted to completely annihilate the humans in one go. However, who would have thought that the ones to be completely annihilated weren't the humans, but themselves? This could be considered karma. They reaped what they sowed. After all, the power that destroyed all of the Yuan Ku wasn't Guhan's own power, but Tongtian's. Guhan was merely a porter. Following the death of the millions of Yuan Ku elites, the entire sky darkened in an instant. A huge dimensional vortex that covered the entire sky slowly formed. The corpses of the Yuan Ku in the deep pit floated up one by one and flew into the air before being sucked into the dimensional vortex. This dimensional vortex was probably the largest dimensional vortex in the history of the Great Calamity. The deaths of several million Yuanko bandits at the same time was something that had never happened since the Great Calamity. Oh, I can't waste them. Upon seeing the huge dimensional vortex, the corners of Ji Yuhan's mouth finally curled into a smile. Without a word, he threw all the sword ladies in his hands into the dimensional vortex. At the same time, he pulled all the sword bearers out of the void. What is this? These sword bearers who came out of the void had no idea what was happening outside. They only knew that they were forcefully pulled out of the void, and then everything that they were once familiar with was gone. In its place was a huge pit, a pit that no human dared to imagine and had never seen before. This can't be Yangjing City, right? Although they couldn't see anything that Yangjing City used to be, some of the swordbearers who were born and raised in Yangjing City could sense that the huge pit that they were born in was their hometown, Yangjing City, based on their memories of Yangjing City that they couldn't be more familiar with and the sixth sense that came from the depths of their hearts. It was just that no one could believe that Yangjing City, which was still standing on the ground just a moment ago, had turned into a bottomless pit in just a few short minutes. This was unacceptable to them, no matter if it was in terms of character or emotion. Everyone, don't waste time. Send all your sword maidens into the dimensional vortex. Quick! These swordbearers, who were still wondering if this was Beijing City, immediately heard a loud shout. When they looked up, they realized that there was an incomparably huge dimensional vortex in the sky that they had never seen before. At the sight of such a huge dimensional vortex, all the swordbearers were so shocked that they even forgot to take out their sword maidens. They just looked at the sky in a daze, not knowing what to do. There's no time. Don't waste the price that we humans have paid. Guhan's voice rang in their ears again. This time, the sword-bearers came back to their senses and hurriedly took out their sword maidens. Then, the sword maidens were automatically swept up by the huge suction force of the dimensional vortex and flew into it to absorb the massive amount of sword essences inside. These humans actually dare to come out. At the same time, the prehistoric Yuan Ku who saw the humans absorbing the sword essences were extremely furious. After all, the sword essences that these humans absorbed were the flesh and blood of their subordinate. Satan, who had the most fiery temper, was the first to attack. However, he didn't dare to attack Guhan in the distance. Instead, he shot out more than 10 streams of demonic chi towards the hundreds of swordbearers around him. Faced with the attacks of the desolate-level Yuan Ku, these swordbearers, who were at most at the famed sword level, naturally couldn't withstand it. They were about to die from Satan's sneak attack. How dare you! As soon as Satan's demonic chi shot out, he heard a roar. Then, 4 sword lights enveloped him. When the sword lights dissipated, Satan no longer existed. A brand new dimensional vortex was slowly opening and absorbing Satan's last remains. Satan died just like that. The rest of the prehistoric Yuan Ku saw Satan's death. Although they sensed that Satan was being attacked and wanted to support him, they didn't do it quickly. Or rather, they did it slowly. In their opinion, a top-notch desolate-level Yuan bandit like Satan would have no problem holding on for 10 to 20 minutes. They had never expected that Satan would not even last for 3 seconds before dying under the sword light. The fairy slaying sword formation. That's the fairy slaying sword formation. The Jade Emperor was like a frightened kitten. After letting out an extremely terrified scream, he immediately fled into the distant sky. In the blink of an eye, he had escaped from this place that was incomparably terrifying in his heart. What a joke! A top prehistoric Yuan Ku like Satan had died in the blink of an eye. Even if he was stronger than Satan, he would only be able to hold on for a few more seconds. The Jade Emperor didn't want to end up like Satan. Chapter 1564. What the Jade Emperor did set a very good example for the other precariousness level Yuan Ku. The rest of the precariousness level Yuan Ku did not have the courage to continue staying here. As for the subordinates of Yuan Ku who were still in the deep pit and might still be alive, these Yuan Ku did not care about them. Without saying a word, they scattered in different directions. Each of them increased their speed to the maximum, fearing that if they were a second slower, they would be caught up and killed by that terrible human being. In fact, these precariousness level Yuan Ku escaped quite thoroughly. Take the Jade Emperor and other precariousness level Yuan Ku of the Celestial Court as an example. After they escaped, they did not even return to their nest, the Celestial Court. Instead, they directly fled into the dimensional space and hid in one of the dimensional worlds. Only by hiding in the dimensional world could the Jade Emperor feel a little safe. Otherwise, if he continued to stay in the main world, he would be retaliated by that abnormal human being sooner or later. Except for some precariousness level Yuan Ku who cherished their nests very much and ran back to their nests, most of the precariousness level Yuan Ku ran into the dimensional world. In this way, all the precariousness level Yuan Ku in the main world were gone. The main world entered an era with the fewest precariousness level Yuan Ku in the past 1,000 years. Have they all run away? Seeing the primordial class Yuan bandit scatter, Ji Han, who had a cold expression on his face, trembled. Then, like a meteor, he fell into the deep pit. His body was stiff and motionless, as if he was dying of a serious illness. In fact, when fighting sect leader Tongtian, Guhan had almost consumed all his strength. Even though sect leader Tongtian had yet to recover from his serious injuries and was ambushed by Ji Han, he was, after all, a sage. Even under the immortal slaying sword formation, he could still fight evenly with Ji Han. In the end, Guhan was forced to use the Chaos Sword method, which made sect leader Tongtian feel that his life was in danger. Then, he did not hesitate to sacrifice the life of his last disciple, Goddess Wudang, and escape. But sect leader Tongtian did not know that if he had persisted for a while and fought with Guhan with the idea of risking his life, Guhan might not have needed to sacrifice the life of Goddess Wudang. Then, Guhan would have taken the initiative to release the immortal killing sword formation and sent sect leader Tongtian away. Because Guhan really did not have the sword essence to fight sect leader Tongtian anymore. Fortunately, sect leader Tongtian detonated Goddess Wudang in the end, and the immortal killing sword formation trapped the great power produced by her self-detonation. Then, he transferred the formation to those bandits. Otherwise, with the remaining power of Guhan, it was impossible for him to kill millions of bandits at once. As for Satan's death, it was Guhan's helplessness. After suffering a huge loss, if the remaining sword-bearers could not absorb enough sword essence from the dimensional vortex, the loss would be too great. Therefore, Guhan had to release the human sword-bearers and let them absorb the precious sword essence. Since he had released the human sword-bearer, he had to bear the risk of the sword-bearer being killed by the primitive-level bandit again. As a result, Ji Han had to squeeze out the last bit of power in his body, as well as the sword essence that the 4 immortal slaying swords had absorbed from the dimensional vortex. Then, he used all of Ji Han's power and comprehension on Satan, who stood out this time. That was the great achievement of killing a primitive-level bandit in 3 seconds, which was also a miraculous achievement that the later generations could only look up to for the rest of their lives. Thanks to this extremely terrifying battle record, the rest of the Primeval bandits were so scared that their guts almost jumped out of their throats. How could they still have the time to guess Ji Han's current situation? All of them wished that they had an extra pair of legs. They all ran for their lives, and humans were completely safe. I'm so tired. Looking at the dimensional vortex that was gradually shrinking in the sky, Guhan, who was lying in the deep pit, murmured and then closed his eyes. What are you guys doing? This time, Guhan did not sleep for too long because Guhan knew that it was not the time to have a good rest with himself. Once Yuenko came to his senses and realized that he was already exhausted, it was very likely that it would be another disaster for the human race. Therefore, Guhan only rested for dozens of minutes before he woke up under the cry of his heart. However, when Guhan opened his eyes, he saw that he was surrounded by people, all of whom were kneeling on one knee beside Guhan. Seeing that Guhan had woken up, they shouted at the same time, "Your Majesty Guhan, we humans will never forget Your Majesty's kindness. What are you guys doing? Get up. Otherwise, I'll be no different from Ying Zheng." Guhan struggled to get up from the ground. When he saw these humans, he smiled in relief. As it turned out, Guhan's worries were unfounded. For more than 10 days, no dragon-class Yuan Ku or above dared to appear near humans. All Yuan Ku hid far away from humans, as though Yuan Ku did not exist in this world. As for Guhan, he was not interested in finding trouble with other Yuan Ku. After learning the truth, Guhan knew that the root of the calamity did not lie with Yuan Ku, but with the Tongtian sect master. As long as the Tongtian sect master was alive, the calamity would not disappear. As long as the Tongtian sect master was killed, the dimensional rift and filth would all disappear. Then, it would be the best time to deal with Yuan Ku. Right now, Guhan and humans had an even greater crisis to face, the food crisis. The food crisis was a name that was both familiar and unfamiliar to humans. The reason why it was familiar was that in the 200 to 300 years after the calamity, the food crisis had always been with humans. During these 200 to 300 years, it was said that the total number of humans who had starved to death had reached 2 billion. After all, humans had been poor at that time. Even if they had the ability to farm, without enough land, it was impossible to grow enough food for humans. At that time, humans could only rely on the small amount of land near the base city to grow food like sweet potatoes and corn. Then, through careful distribution and controlling the human population, they barely maintained the food supply. Later, when the nutrient solution synthesis machine was invented, humans could use machines, probiotics, specialized chloroplast cells, and photosynthesis to produce nutrient solutions in batches to meet the basic needs of human physiology. However, one could imagine the taste of the nutrient solution. As long as humans had a little money, they would rather spend all their money to buy natural food than eat the extremely disgusting nutrient solution. However, it was also because of the invention of the nutrient solution that humans had completely escaped from the food crisis. They could expand their population unscrupulously until the base city could no longer accommodate them. Therefore, it had been more than 700 years since humans had experienced a food crisis. But now, the food crisis had come again. After the Battle of the 12 Zhu Wu, the 8 major base cities had been destroyed. Only Yangjing City was slightly better off, as it had preserved all kinds of machinery needed for human life. However, with this battle and the release of the energy from the explosion of the goddess of incongruence by Guhan, the entire Yangjing City was completely destroyed. All the urban facilities, industrial machines, high-tech equipment, and even the nuclear warehouse were all destroyed. Humans had become so poor that they were left with nothing but their own bodies. Therefore, when Guhan's body recovered and he began to gather Liuanian Ling, Lu Shihua, the remaining 20 or so sword-bearers of the immortal sword tier, as well as some specially selected members of the council, government officials, businessmen, scientists, and other people from all walks of life to hold a human recovery conference, he realized that even if all the Yuan Ku were to die and stop harassing humans, humans would still be in danger of extinction. Because of Guhan's timely appearance, although the last 200 million human population was saved, at the same time, 200 million mouths were saved. These mouths were mouths that needed to be fed. To make matters worse, although Guhan saved these 200 million mouths, he did not save almost all the equipment in Yangjing City, including industrial equipment and high-tech equipment. Without these equipment, humans could not do anything, not even the most basic reconstruction work. Originally, humans had stored a lot of mechanical equipment in the fleeting time gap, but these equipment were transported to Yangjing City when the reconstruction of Yangjing City was carried out. After all, if they wanted to rebuild Yangjing City, these equipment were necessary. However, now that these equipment were destroyed, humans had nothing left. The only thing that could be considered lucky was that Lu Shihua had brought the remaining food with him. Even so, the food was only enough for the remaining humans to use for a month. If the food supply could not be restored after a month, the 200 million people who were lucky enough to survive would probably die. Therefore, the current food crisis was the biggest crisis facing humans. If they could not think of a way to solve this crisis, even if humans did not die, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. Can't we humans find any equipment at all? Guhan looked at the human elites who were still surrounding him and said with a heavy expression, "The most important thing now is food. If we all work together, can we create a nutrient solution synthesizer?" "It's impossible, Your Majesty." A white-robed director of the Ministry of Science and Technology lowered his head and said with tears in his eyes, "The nutrient solution synthesizer is not a device that can be manufactured by ordinary industries. It involves many key components made of special materials. If these special materials can't be manufactured, it's absolutely impossible to manufacture nutrients and deposition. How long will it take to produce these special materials?" Guhan asked helplessly. "Your Majesty, producing these special materials requires special equipment too, but to produce these special equipment requires specialized machine tools, and to produce these specialized machine tools requires a huge industrial machine. Your Majesty, please forgive us for being straightforward, but if we can guarantee the supply of food and materials, it will take the research department and the industrial department more than 3 years to complete the entire set of equipment, Your Majesty." The supervisor's words undoubtedly hit the bottom of the hearts of the participants. 3 years was most likely enough for all humans to starve to death. How could they possibly have 3 years? Guhan finally realized that the thing that threatened the survival of humans was not Yuan Ku, but their own stomachs. However, no matter how capable Guhan was, there was no way he could make food out of thin air, not to mention that it was food for 200 million people. Chapter 1565. Faced with such a crucial problem, everyone in the meeting was sweating profusely. They had no idea what to do. They could not help but feel anxious. It was a problem that concerned the food supply of 200 million people. If they all starved to death, it would probably be a demon in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Everyone knew that this problem had to be solved, but no one could come up with a solution. They would rather fight Yuenko than think about this damned problem. "I wonder how our ancestors solved the problem at the beginning of the apocalypse," one of the swordsmen said. It was obvious that he was trying to find a solution to the problem from his ancestors' experience. At first, there was quite a lot of food stored in the old Yangjing city. Our ancestor had a natural dimensional pocket, so he brought all the food with him. It was barely enough for us to eat in the early stages. When we entered the fleeting time gap and the environment became safer, the ancestor organized the people in the fleeting time gap to farm. That way, we managed to get enough food to feed 100,000 people, Liuyan Ling said. "That's right, we can farm too." Liuyan Ling's words enlightened some of the people in the meeting. "We can open up a large area of fertile land. A few thousand years ago, when there was no advanced technology, our ancestors could grow enough food to feed a few 100 million people with their bare hands. Now, we can use the most traditional method to grow food too." "That's right. That's a good idea." The swordsman's words immediately won the approval of many people in the meeting. But soon, someone coldly retorted, "I can tell that it's a guy who doesn't know anything about agriculture. How could he say something like that? Even the sweet potato, which has the shortest ripening period, needs 4 months to mature. By then, everyone would have starved to death. Humph, it's only 4 months. Our food can last for another month. At most, we can eat a little less. 1 mouthful of food is like 4 mouthfuls of food. As long as we endure it, we will be able to last for 4 months. Someone immediately said, "That's right, after 4 months, I don't think even half of the 200 million people will survive. You'll be the murderer of 100 million people. What can we do? It's better than everyone starving to death." "Enough, your thoughts are so naive. Do you think you can feed all of us in 4 months with just sweet potatoes?" The agricultural expert who spoke first could not help but say, "If you want to grow enough sweet potatoes for 200 million people, you would need at least 3 provinces of arable land. We don't have that much land." The agricultural expert's words made everyone speechless. They didn't expect that it would take 3 provinces worth of farmland to grow enough sweet potatoes. Even at their peak, humans could only control 8 base cities, which added up to less than 2 provinces. Now that human forces had declined to such an extent, the total number of sword-bearers was less than 20,000. Under such circumstances, they might not even be able to control 1/3 of a province, let alone 3 provinces. Alright, there's no need to argue about this anymore. Agriculture is the foundation of our race. We must start preparing for the planting of sweet potatoes and the other crops now. The people from the Ministry of Agriculture will start collecting the seeds of all the crops we have, and compile a set of textbooks that can teach ordinary people how to plant the crops after reading them. Don't use too many words, limit it to 500. Otherwise, no one will be able to understand it, said Gu Han. The people from the Ministry of Agriculture immediately nodded in agreement. The argument regarding agriculture was put aside for the time being, but it was not settled yet. They would have to wait for a month, when all the food was used up. Where were they going to find food for the humans? Everyone from the Ministry of Science and Technology, are the nutrient synthesizers all damaged? Not a single one is in perfect condition. Gu Han asked the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology. Not exactly, there should be 2 nutrient synthesizers in perfect condition in the gap, the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology said after a moment of recollection. Ling, can you please bring the machines over? Gu Han turned to Liunian Ling and said. Liunian Ling nodded and disappeared from the venue. After waiting for about half an hour, Liunian Ling returned with the 2 machines. Gu Han looked at the machine carefully and found that it had a cross-sectional area of 100 square meters, and a height of 6 meters, which was equivalent to the height and size of a 2-story building. How much food can this machine provide for the humans? What does it need for raw materials? Asked Gu Han. If we use it sparingly and only ensure the basic supply of heat to the humans, then this machine should be able to work 24 hours a day. With such a machine working 24 hours a day, it should be able to meet the needs of around 20,000 people. As for the raw materials, we just need to add enough water, then a large amount of soil, and finally human feces. What? This nutrient solution is made from mud and feces? Some of the humans immediately felt disgusted after hearing the words of the Ministry of Science and Technology. They wanted to vomit the nutrient solution they drank yesterday. Don't you make a fuss. The person from the Ministry of Agriculture rolled his eyes at the people who vomited. Don't the seeds need mud and feces to mature? What's so surprising about that? We humans rely on feces to survive. After the Ministry of Agriculture said that, more people vomited. In other words, if we can produce 20,000 of these machines in a month, we can guarantee the food supply for everyone. Gu Han interrupted the somewhat disgusting atmosphere and said directly, Yes, Your Majesty. As long as we have 20,000 machines and send 1 million people to collect the materials needed to make the nutrient solution, I can guarantee that there will be no problems with the food supply for 200 million people. The person from the Ministry of Science and Technology replied readily. He was actually bragging, but it didn't matter how much he bragged. With the current human condition, it was impossible to obtain 20,000 machines in a month no matter what. Do we have the materials to make these machines? Gu Han asked immediately. This. Didn't I just say? The materials to make these machines can't be produced at the moment. The person from the Ministry of Science and Technology said pitifully. However, before he could finish, he was directly interrupted by Gu Han. I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you, do we have the materials to make these machines? I'm afraid we don't have that either. They've all turned into ruins and are lying in the deep pit. The person from the Ministry of Science and Technology said weakly. Then, we do have them. Gu Han's brows relaxed and immediately ordered the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology to send a large number of sword-bearers directly to the bottom of the deep pit to transport the materials to make the nutrient solution synthesizer. Although they did not know why Gu Han gave such an inexplicable order, at this time, Gu Han's prestige was so great that no one would question Gu Han's orders. Therefore, the people from the Ministry of Science and Technology immediately left with some sword-bearers. After less than an hour, These sword bearers returned with colorful metal balls of various shapes in their dimensional pockets. What are these? Some people in the venue could not help but ask when they saw these strange metal balls. These are the materials needed to make the machines. The person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology said with a bitter smile, "It's just that these metals have all melted under the effect of high energy and finally gathered into each of these metal balls. With our current technological power, we can't separate these metals at all. We can only bring them all according to His Majesty's requests." Very good. That's enough. You guys have done well. Bringing these metal balls directly was originally a helpless move by the Ministry of Science and Technology, but they did not expect to win Guhan's praise, which shocked everyone. What does Guhan want these metal balls that have all kinds of metals mixed together for? Could it be that he has the ability to separate these metals out of thin air? As soon as this question popped up in everyone's mind, they saw Guhan wave his hand forward, and one of the metal balls the size of a basketball flew directly into Guhan's hand. Then, something happened that blinded everyone. After the metal ball was held in Guhan's hand, the metal ball that was as hard as an alloy seemed to suffer from osteoporosis at this moment. Countless powder began to fall from the metal ball. The powder that fell off did not simply fall to the ground. Instead, it seemed to be guided by something as it split into hundreds of different thin lines and floated towards different landing points. Finally, it piled up on the ground and formed small piles of powder. At first, the speed of this metal ball powder was not fast, but as time went by, the metal ball began to shrink rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the different thin lines became thicker and thicker. In the end, only 10 minutes later, the basketball-sized metal ball completely disappeared in Guhan's hand, turning into hundreds of piles of powder. Oh my god, this is a hardcore fan, a hardcore fan. An ore expert from the Ministry of Science and Technology suddenly rushed to the largest pile of powder among the more than 100 piles of powder, grabbed a handful of powder, put it in his palm, and carefully looked at it. Then, he stuck it to his nose and smelled it. Finally, he even licked the powder with his tongue. Finally, he shouted excitedly, "This is iron powder. This is high-purity iron powder. Oh my god! I've never seen iron powder of such high purity. Oh my god, how is this possible?" Chapter 1566. The scream of this expert startled everyone. Ordinary people might not understand the shocking inside story behind this expert's words, but the rest of the experts immediately reacted. Without hesitation, they pounced on the other piles of powder. As a result, each of them let out a roar like the expert just now. These experts were horrified to find that these piles of more than 100 different kinds of powder were all extremely high-purity powder of various elements. Although it was impossible to judge the purity of these powders with the naked eye, according to the experience of these experts, the purity of these powders was probably higher than any powder extracted by any scientific means. The precision was probably more than 12 decimal places, which was almost no different from 100% purity. And these piles of powders were almost equivalent to placing all the elements on the periodic table here, and they were all extremely pure elements. The appearance of some elements even exceeded the limits of the scientists' imagination. Students who had studied chemistry knew that some elements could exist independently, but some could not. They could only exist in this world in the form of compounds. This was almost an eternal truth in the field of chemistry. However, with the appearance of these piles of powders, the truth in the field of chemistry was broken. Those elements that could not exist independently had all formed individual substances and appeared in front of them. But how did all this happen? Although the formation of these powders happened directly under the eyes of these scientists, it was precisely because they saw the formation of these powders with their naked eyes that the scientists felt even more incredulous. Who would believe that just by placing a metal ball in one's hand, the metal ball would automatically split into 100 piles of powders composed of various pure elements? Was this still the power of a human? Your Majesty, are you a god? A scientist could not help but ask all kinds of questions in his mind, kneeling in front of Guhan and dumbfoundedly. God! A trace of a playful expression appeared on Guhan's face. There are many gods in Yuan Ku's place, and a lot of them have died in my hands. Do you think I am a god? The scientist was speechless. Indeed, there were many things in Yuan Ku's place, but there were even more gods. In fact, the ability of a sword holder at the level of a fairy sword was already comparable to the legendary gods. No, this is a power that even the gods don't have. I'm afraid this is a power that only those who have mastered the origin of the world can have, another scientist said nervously. All right, you don't have to guess anymore. You don't have to worry about how I separated it. Mark all of these piles of powder for me and indicate what kind of element it is. Then, give me a list of the materials needed to build this machine, the materials needed to make the different components, and the elemental ratios and chemical compounds of these materials. Give me a detailed table, understand? Guhan said to the scientists with a serious face. Yes. To be honest, this was not an easy task. A nutrient solution synthesizer involved thousands of different materials, and each material had a different composition and element. If it had to be manually listed, the list of materials alone would probably be tens or even millions of words. This was definitely not an easy task. However, the scientists accepted it without hesitation. Although they did not know what Guhan wanted to do, they knew that it was enough to follow His Majesty's orders. This time, His Majesty would definitely lead mankind out of this predicament and completely save mankind from disaster. Therefore, under the instructions of the person in charge of the Science and Technology Department, almost all the scientists threw themselves into the work of analyzing the materials. They immediately wrote down the list in the conference room. At this time, Guhan did not idle around. He found the person in charge of the medical department and asked for all the nanos in stock. The medical department could not even cry when faced with Guhan's request. The medical department was responsible for treating the patients. Even when the battle was at its most intense, they still insisted on treating the injured swordbearers in the core area. Therefore, most of the medical resources were stored in the hospital. Moreover, Guhan's void gate appeared a little too hastily. All the humans entered the void gate as soon as possible and did not bring along the various medicines that were still in the hospital. As a result, after the destruction of Yangjing City, almost all the resources of the medical department were destroyed. For example, there were only 3 bottles of nano-capsules that the medical department gave to Guhan at this time. The nano-capsules added up to less than 3 million nanomachines. Too little. Looking at the 3 bottles of nano-capsules in his hand, Guhan once again felt how terrifying the shortage of human resources was. However, at this time, Guhan could not afford to lose the nano-capsules. This was the only way for Guhan to save mankind. Therefore, Guhan immediately said to all the sword holders attending the meeting, "Everyone, I hope that everyone can give me the remaining nano-capsules in your hands. I have an important use for them. This is related to the fate of the entire human race," Ji Yuhan said to all the swordbearers. The swordbearers looked at each other, and without saying a word, they began to mess around in the dimensional pocket again. Needless to say, these sword holders' reserves were really quite rich. In just a short while, hundreds of bottles of nano-capsules were sent to Guhan. This also meant that 100 million nanomachines were in Guhan's hands. Not enough, it's still not enough. Guhan shook his head. At this time, his consciousness fragments had exceeded 10 billion. If he wanted to combine all his consciousness fragments with nanomachines, he would need at least 10,000 bottles of nano-capsules. I'll go to all the sword holders and ask for them. Seeing Guhan's reaction, Lu Shihua seemed to have understood something and immediately rushed out of the meeting venue. The other sword holders also said that they would go to other brothers and friends who had not yet attended the meeting to ask for nano-capsules. This was originally a matter of sending a group text message, but because the quantum communication switch was also damaged in Yangjing City, at this time, personal terminals had become useless and could not be connected to the internet. It was impossible to contact other humans. They could only convey Guhan's instructions through the most primitive way of word of mouth. Fortunately, there were enough sword bearers in the conference room. They each found their friends and brothers. After saying that this was what His Majesty Hongjun needed, these sword bearers also contributed their precious nano-capsules without hesitation. It should be known that nanocapsules were the key materials that could save lives at critical times when there was a shortage of materials. After hearing that this was what Guhan needed, the sword holders did not hesitate to contribute such important materials. Soon, there were thousands of bottles of nanocapsules in Guhan's hands. Guhan broke all the nanocapsules in one breath and then controlled his consciousness fragments to merge with the nanomachines. In the end, Guhan had 1 billion nanomachines that were freely controlled by Guhan. However, this column only met 1/10 of Guhan's needs. Do you have the manufacturing process and materials for nanomachines? Guhan asked the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology. The person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology nodded, put down what he was doing, and wrote for a minute. Then, he sent a piece of paper full of words to Guhan's hands. It's easy to manufacture these nanomachines. Perhaps because of their small size, the manufacturing process and materials for nanomachines were surprisingly simple. It required about a dozen different elemental materials. Come on. After Guhan memorized the words on the paper, he pointed at the pile of material powder on the ground. Then, more than a dozen piles of material powder flew into Guhan's hands like a thin line. When these material powder gathered in Guhan's hands, they disappeared without a trace as if they did not exist at all. Everyone was baffled by this scene. Only Guhan himself knew that the moment these materials used to make nanomachines were gathered in Guhan's hands, they were directly made into new nanomachines by the nanomachines controlled by Guhan. They quickly merged with Guhan's consciousness fragments and in turn, made new nanomachines. The dozen piles of material powder on the ground were not enough for Guhan. In just 2 or 3 minutes, the smallest amount of elemental powder was used up. However, the number of nanomachines in Guhan's hands had increased by 100 million. Without saying a word, Guhan grabbed an even larger metal ball with his left hand. Just like before, this metal ball was once again broken down into different elemental powders. But other than the elemental powders that he could not use, which continued to pile up on the ground, the rest of the elemental powders flew directly into the palm of Guhan's right hand and began to be used to make new nanomachines. Just like that, after a full 3 hours, almost all the metal balls brought by the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology were used up, and Guhan finally had the number of nanomachines he needed to make 10 billion nanomachines. All the fragments of consciousness in his body could be put to use. It's done. We're finally done writing. It was also at this time that the thousands of crazy scientists actually spent less than 4 hours writing down the various materials needed to make the nutrient solution synthesizer, as well as the detailed elemental ratios of each material, as well as which components needed which materials. I hope I can complete such a complicated task. Looking at the thousands of pieces of paper in his hands and the huge house-like machine in front of him, even Guhan could not help but feel a huge challenge at this moment. Guhan wanted to challenge something that no one in human history had ever accomplished, or rather, it was something that no human had ever dared to imagine. That was to use the strength of humans to use nanomachines as tools and molecules as materials to create a complete large-scale mechanical device. Chapter 1567. I'm sure everyone has played with building blocks when they were young. Building a castle or an animal out of building blocks was something that gave a sense of achievement. Then there was a game called Minecraft. In Minecraft, you could build a city out of pixel-like blocks. This was something that even an adult would feel a sense of accomplishment and would never get tired of it. But if you were given billions of building blocks to build a city out of, would you still find it interesting? You might call it a lunatic because it wasn't something that humans could do. At this moment, almost everyone in the room was thinking the same thing. Under everyone's watchful eyes, after the metal balls were decomposed into powder, they all immediately moved from Guhan's left hand to his right hand, forming a brand new material. Guhan's speed was slow at first, and he only disassembled 7 or 8 metal balls in an hour. But as time passed, Guhan's speed became faster and faster, and he even disassembled 7 or 8 metal balls at the same time. The thing that Guhan was building in his right hand revealed its true form. It was the prototype of a nutrient solution manufacturing machine. Oh my God! What kind of ability is that? Is Hongjun Jendi planning to build a nutrient solution manufacturing machine made up of tens of thousands of components with his own hands? Everyone was shocked by what they saw. The meeting had been going on for almost 20 hours, and no one had eaten for a day. But no one was willing to leave the room. They were all focused on Guhan, looking forward to the final product that Guhan made. This wait lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. After 2 days and 2 nights, all the metal spheres had been decomposed, and the 2 nutrient solution manufacturing machines that looked exactly the same, except that one of them did not have any paint on it, were placed in the venue. Try it out. See if this machine works. After the final disassembly, Guhan couldn't help but feel dizzy. He weakly waved at the people from the science department and fell to the ground. Fortunately, Liuyan Ling reacted quickly and caught Guhan in her arms. Oh! The people from the science department were stunned for a while before stupidly coming back to their senses. They fetched soil, water, and smelly feces from outside and stuffed them into the nutrient solution manufacturing machine that Guhan just made. As the power was connected, the nutrient solution manufacturing machine began to rumble. In less than 10 minutes, the first light green nutrient solution flowed out from the outlet of the machine. Let me have a taste first. The person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology eagerly poured the first nutrient solution into a basin and drank it without hesitation. Although the taste of the nutrient solution made people frown, the person in charge of the Ministry of Science and Technology exclaimed with joy, "It's exactly the same, it tastes exactly the same as the nutrient solution, and I feel like I'm full of energy now. The hunger from the past 2 days and 2 nights has disappeared without a trace." Although the experts personally tasted it and believed that the nutrient solution produced was absolutely the most authentic, the science department soon brought the only remaining testing equipment over. But very quickly, the Ministry of Science and Technology brought the only remaining testing equipment over. After a series of detailed and scientific tests, the testers from the Ministry of Science and Technology patted their chests and assured everyone that this was definitely the genuine nutrient solution without any side effects. Sir Ji Han had really broken down and recast a nutrient solution manufacturing machine. The words of the person in charge of the science department made everyone exclaim. Could it be that sword immortal Hong Jun really mastered the ability to break down and recombine matter and made a nutrient solution manufacturing machine? Anyone who had a little understanding of science knew that in order to directly use elements to construct matter, it had to be constructed directly at the atomic level. Even a drop of water had 670 trillion molecules. Just looking at this number could probably make many people dumbfounded. How terrifying was this Hongjun Jendi to be able to master such a terrifying power? If this power continued to develop, how terrifying would it be? Thinking of this, everyone didn't dare to think carefully anymore. Then, they immediately looked at Guhan on the rostrum. When they were about to flatter Guhan, they found that Hongjun Jendi had fallen into a deep sleep in Liuyan Ling's arms. This sleep lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. No, you slept for 3 days just to manufacture one. You can't go on like this. Not long after Guhan woke up, Liuyan Ling immediately objected when she heard that Guhan planned to repeat the behavior of a few days ago and break down and re-inject the nutrient solution manufacturing machine. Liuyan Ling's objection was entirely due to her concern for Guhan's health. After Guhan completed the first decomposition and recasting, he slept for 3 days. Obviously, this matter consumed a lot of Guhan's spirit. Liuyan Ling couldn't bear to see Guhan overdraft his body like this. Well, there are still 200 million people waiting to be fed, but we still need 20,000 such nutrient solution manufacturing machines. If I don't work hard, will I watch our compatriots starve to death? Guhan said while holding Liuyan Ling in his arms. But it's already too late. Liuyan Ling lay on Guhan's thigh and said with tears in her eyes, "It took you 2 days to break down and reconstruct one machine. In the end, you have to sleep for another 3 days to recover your spirit. You can only make 6 in a month at most. This is just a drop in the bucket. Why are you so persistent? How about this? You'll need to figure out how to build an industrial machine. As long as you can build one, we'll be able to use it to build more equipment and restore the entire system. We'll be able to mass-produce the nutrient solution maker then. You don't have to work so hard. Fleeting Ling said. That's right. You're right. I should make the industrial machine first. The corner of Guhan's mouth twitched. But by the time we restore our entire industrial system through the industrial machine, it will probably be 3 or 4 years later. By then, our compatriots will have starved to death. But, well, there are no buts. The reason why the production of the first one is so slow is because I have no experience. As long as the first one can be made, I can greatly improve the production speed. Besides, I can split my consciousness multiple times, so the speed can be even faster. Guhan did not wait for Liunian Ling to persuade him again. He began to command everyone to go to the deep pit in Yangjing City to collect the metal balls and move them all to an open area. Guhan himself sat directly in the open area and began to break down the metal balls while directly casting the new nutrient solution manufacturing machine. Just as Guhan said to Liunian Ling, after the first experience, Guhan's second production speed was much faster. This time, it only took 25 hours to successfully manufacture the second nutrient solution manufacturing machine. The third nutrient solution manufacturing machine only took 20 hours. By the time the 10th nutrient solution manufacturing machine was completed, Guhan had reduced the time to 2 hours. By the time the 100th nutrient solution manufacturing machine was completed, the time had been reduced to only 20 minutes. Teacher Wang, look. Why is this machine different from the previous machines? Looking at these nutrient solution manufacturing machines that were broken down and cast by Guhan, a big shot from the Ministry of Science and Technology said in disbelief. The reason why Guhan could increase the speed of the nutrient solution manufacturing machine to 20 minutes was not without reason. Compared with the previous machines, these newly cast machines were obviously only 1/5 of the previous size. Is this a shrunken version of the nutrient solution manufacturing machine? Another big shot from the Ministry of Science and Technology muttered. He secretly started a nutrient solution manufacturing machine that had just been broken down and cast, and then carefully recorded the production status of this nutrient solution manufacturing machine. In the end, he was surprised to find that compared with the original machines, not only was there no difference in the quality of the nutrient solution manufactured by the newly produced machines, but the production speed of the nutrient solution was also about 10 times faster than that of the previous machines. In other words, such a newly produced machine could meet the nutrient solution needs of 200,000 people a day. In that case, the original 10,000 nutrient solution manufacturing machines had been reduced to 1,000, which could meet the needs of all humans. This was something that these two big shots could never imagine. It seems that His Majesty Hong Jun did not just cast them. He also improved these machines. A big shot from the Ministry of Science and Technology side. Since ancient times, if they had not seen it with their own eyes, perhaps no one would believe that there was such a terrifying thing in this world and that there were such terrifying humans. When they saw the decomposed metal powder piled up like bricks and directly piled up into a nutrient solution manufacturing machine, all the humans were dumbfounded. Because Guhan was directly broken down and recast in an open area, almost all the humans could see Guhan's earth-shattering deeds. At first, everyone was shocked, and some people even collapsed to the ground in fear, unable to say a word. But as time went by, humans gradually got used to and accepted Guhan's abnormal behavior, and even became somewhat accustomed to it. It was said that some leaders of major forces secretly sent some Yuan Ku with the ability to hide into human territories. After seeing what Guhan had done with their own eyes, all the big shots Yuan Ku were so scared that they almost wet their pants. Some of the big shots Yuan Ku who were still in the main world were directly scared into the dimensional world. This main world was really too terrifying. There was actually such an abnormal human like Guhan. They didn't want to see Guhan again. It seemed that until Guhan died, these frightened Yuan Ku big shots didn't dare to appear in the main world again. Chapter 1568. Originally, humans thought that one machine every 20 minutes was Guhan's limit, but it turned out that there was no limit to Guhan's improvement. Although the speed of one machine every 20 minutes could not be improved any further, Guhan began to try to make 2 nutrient solution manufacturing machines at the same time. This number soon became 4, 8, 16, and finally, when Guhan reached the total number of 1,000, he could make 32 nutrient solution manufacturing machines at the same time. At this time, there were only 6 days left before the 1-month deadline. In other words, it only took Guhan 19 days to make these 1,000 machines. When Guhan completed the task and stood up again from the ground, no human looked at Guhan as if he was a human. The way they looked at Guhan had become the way they looked at God. When most humans saw Guhan, they immediately knelt down to Guhan and kowtowed respectfully as if they were facing Buddha. A few months ago, Ying Zheng wanted to use violence to force everyone to kneel in front of him, but he failed in the end. Now, Guhan did not show any desire to become a god, but all human beings took the initiative to kneel in front of Guhan, sincerely offering their knees and foreheads. In their eyes, Guhan had become the only god. After all, when they saw how Guhan created things out of thin air with their own eyes, when they learned that Guhan had been working day and night for 19 days to satisfy the rations of all human beings, Guhan's position in their hearts had become that of a god. They believed that as long as the human race continued to exist, Guhan's position as a god would never change. This was something that Guhan had never thought of before. To put it bluntly, at this moment, Guhan's position in the hearts of human beings had surpassed that of Kunzu 1,000 years ago. After all, Kunzu was just an ancestor, and it was still within the scope of human beings. It was said that there were already many people who addressed Guhan as the god of swords in private. Why do I feel like the title of sword god is less awesome than Kunzu's? After learning about this matter, Guhan couldn't help but say with a bitter smile. However, Guhan didn't have time to complain. After 19 consecutive days of sleepless nights, coupled with 3 consciousness fragments, Guhan's soul was on the verge of collapse. Therefore, he fell asleep again, and this sleep lasted for half a month before he woke up. However, these 19 days of hard work were not completely in vain. During this half-month-long sleep, Guhan was not simply sleeping. After going through so much hard work, Guhan was surprised to find that he might have found a completely different path. In fact, human beings were not really safe, and sect leader Tongtian was not really dead. He must be hiding somewhere and licking his wounds. This time, it was impossible to trick sect leader Tongtian again. After what happened this time, sect leader Tongtian would not appear before Zhongtai fully recovered even if the sky collapsed and the earth collapsed. Therefore, the next time he fought with sect leader Tongtian, he would face sect leader Tongtian in his complete state. At that time, if he was still unable to become a sage, then Jiyu Han would definitely lose. Even if Jiyu Han seemed to be a godlike existence right now, he would definitely lose. Therefore, Guhan had to find a way to become a sage. Previously, Guhan tried to cultivate a heavenly way through the Genesis sword seed, and then come into contact with the great way through this heavenly way. However, because of Liuanian Ling's aging, in the end, Guhan sacrificed the Genesis sword seed he had just created and used the power of the Genesis sword seed to save Liuanian Ling. In this way, unless Guhan could find the 12 Zhu Wu again and defeat the real body of Pangu formed by their fusion, he would not be able to get another Genesis sword seed. The appearance of the 12 Zhu Wu previously was the result of various coincidences. If Guhan took the initiative to look for the 12 Zhu Wu, it would undoubtedly be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Guhan was not sure if he could find the 12 Zhu Wu before sect leader Tongtian completely recovered. This time, by decomposing and recasting the nutrient liquid manufacturing machine, Guhan seemed to have found a brand new path. However, even Guhan could not be sure if this path was true or not. Guhan needed to practice it himself to get the real answer. However, if he wanted to practice his guess, the price that Guhan would have to pay was too high. Therefore, Guhan had to think carefully about whether he should go deep into different dimensional worlds to look for the 12 Zhu Wu, or experiment with this new path that seemed unreliable and unsure if it would succeed in the end. Just when Guhan was having a headache about this, a new problem appeared. Your Majesty, please think of a way. 30,000 old people have starved to death yesterday. Not long after Guhan woke up, the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs suddenly rushed into Guhan's tent and cried, "What the hell is going on? Guhan asked as he glanced at Liuyan Ling, who was following closely behind the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Obviously, Liuyan Ling had been stopping the person in charge from entering and did not want him to disturb Guhan's rest. "Your Majesty, there's no electricity. We have no electricity," the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs said in a hoarse voice. Guhan thought that he could solve the food crisis that humans were facing if he created enough nutrient liquid manufacturing machines. However, Guhan neglected a crucial problem. If there was no electricity, all the nutrient liquid manufacturing machines were just decorations. At this time, the only source of electricity for humans was the nuclear fusion batteries collected from the human sword-bearers. By relying on these nuclear fusion batteries, they could barely form a large power source for humans to use. However, these nuclear fusion batteries were only batteries after all and did not have much power. Even if they were put together, they would only have less than 1/10,000,000th of the original power in Yangjing. Originally, because human electrical appliances were almost destroyed, this power source was barely enough. However, as the nutrient liquid manufacturing machines continued to appear, these large electricity consumers began to crazily devour the electricity generated by the nuclear fusion batteries. Just 10 machines had already used up all the electricity. This meant that even if Guhan created 1,000 nutrient liquid manufacturing machines, only 10 of them would actually work. Of course, there would be a situation of insufficient food supply. These things should have been reported to Guhan immediately, but Liuyan Ling and Lu Shihua forcibly suppressed it. They knew very well that if they let Guhan take care of the problem of electricity, Guhan would probably really die of exhaustion. They must give Guhan enough time to rest. The direct consequence of this was that on the 6th day after Guhan fell into a deep sleep, the food supply was already insufficient. By the 10th day, there were weak old people who starved to death one after another. By the 15th day, it had developed to the extent that tens of thousands of people starved to death every day. The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs finally could not stand such a tragic atmosphere, so he saw a gap and forcibly broke through the blockade of Liuyan Ling and Lu Shihua, and laid the facts in front of Guhan. Sigh. After learning the truth of the matter, Guhan did not say much. He neither blamed Liuyan Ling for hiding it, nor did he praise the person in charge for his courage. He just calmly entered the void, and it did not take long for him to return with a cute little girl. "Here, take her." Guhan threw the little girl in front of the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. "What?" The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs was shocked. He did not understand what Guhan meant by throwing a little girl out. "She has eaten so many of our high-purity nuclear fuel rods, it's time for her to contribute a little to us humans," Guhan said calmly. "Hurry up and use me." "Oh no," the little girl said with a sad face. She was originally hiding in a nearby mountain to eat the high-purity nuclear fuel rods she had stolen from the humans with relish when she was caught by a hand. After being threatened by Guhan, she could only resign to her fate. "This is just a child." "How?" the person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs said with a dumbfounded look. "Little girl. Mount. Riding on a little girl." The person in charge of the Ministry of Civil Affairs suddenly had a frightening scene in his mind. "She is not a child. She is just my mount. You can rest assured and use her." Under Guhan's forceful order, the person in charge could only take the mount of Emperor Hongjun to the temporary power room doubtfully. Then, he connected all kinds of power to the little girl. Then, the little girl's body flashed, and all 1,000 nutrient solution manufacturing machines lit up the green light of working in an instant. These 1,000 nutrient solution manufacturing machines all entered the working state. Looking at the little girl, she was still lively as if it was not difficult to supply electricity to so many nutrient solution manufacturing machines. Finally, with the help of this Kangya brand Lola-type fully automatic generator, the human food crisis was finally alleviated. The later generations also recorded Kangya's contribution. After human society returned to normal, they also specially carved a sculpture of a little girl with all kinds of wires wrapped around her body to commemorate Kangya's contribution to mankind. It was just that no one knew if the level of the sculptor was not good enough, but the wires wrapped around Kangya looked like tentacles. Although the problem of electricity consumption was solved, it was only a temporary solution. With Kangya's jumpy character, she could not persist as a power bank for too long. Guhan had to recreate the nuclear fusion generator like how he made the nutrient solution manufacturing machine. With the solution of the electricity problem, more problems such as housing problems, defense problems, industrial problems, and so on would emerge. These needed Guhan to solve. More importantly, humans couldn't stay in the wilderness forever. They had to restore the base cities they once had. Otherwise, they would be nothing more than wandering ghosts. Of course, for Guhan, there was another more important thing, which was the problem of the Qingpin sword. In other words, the problem of the Qingping sword. Chapter 1569. Ever since Qingping suppressed Qingpin's consciousness and took control of the Qingpin sword, it had been under Qingping's control. Guhan could only forcibly control the Qingpin sword by commanding it. This problem shouldn't have dragged on for so long, but after defeating Tongtian, Guhan was busy solving many problems, so he didn't care about Qingpin's question. However, it didn't mean that the problem didn't exist. It was stuck in Guhan's throat, forcing Guhan to solve it as soon as possible. Now, Guhan finally had time to solve the problem of Qingpin's sword. It seemed to be easy to solve. As long as he cooperated with Qingping to suppress Qingpin's consciousness and pull it back, it would be enough. However, when Guhan tried to solve this problem, he was horrified to find that he couldn't get Qingpin's consciousness back no matter how hard he tried. "I've eaten that brat's consciousness," Qingping said to Guhan proudly after Qingpin's sword turned into a bride again. Her face was filled with the joy of revenge. "What did you say?" Guhan couldn't help trembling. It was the first time that Guhan found that he couldn't control his own body. "Guhan, are you okay?" Chidian suddenly appeared beside Guhan and held Guhan's body so that Guhan wouldn't fall. At this moment, all of Guhan's sword ladies turned into sword ladies at the same time. It wasn't because of Guhan's order, nor was it their own will. It was a sign of losing control. After hearing Qingping's words, Guhan suddenly lost control of his body, soul, and will, which made all of his sword ladies turn into sword ladies automatically. All of Guhan's sword ladies sensed the bone-chilling fear in Guhan's heart through this. Chidian immediately held Guhan in his arms, feeling sorry for him. "I said I ate her will." Qingping seemed to enjoy Guhan's frightened and trembling expression very much. She continued to say proudly, "She was just a part of me. Now, I've reintegrated her into my soul. That's the right thing to do, isn't it? Idiot, I split her to repair the injury in the depths of my soul wholeheartedly. At the same time, I didn't want the real me to face a fake master like you. My only master is the great sect leader Tongtian. No one else is worthy of being my master. I can't even call him master. Therefore, I simply split a part of my soul to deal with you, a chess piece." The Qingping sword said coldly. Without anyone's guidance, the Qingping sword automatically spilled its story like beans pouring out beans. It turned out that after sect leader Tongtian was sealed, he temporarily threw Qingping's sword back to the main world and threw it to Fleeting Time Calendar. At the same time, he gave Qingping a task, which was to find and assist Hongjun of the next era, who was destined to defeat him. Then, Qingping's sword lurked beside him as a chess piece. Finally, if she could pull him to sect leader Tongtian's side, she would try her best to keep him alive until sect leader Tongtian was resurrected. Then, she would wait for sect leader Tongtian's order. "So, your first master is actually Kanzu, right?" After listening to Qingping's sword story, Guhan asked in a trembling voice. "That's right. According to your human literature, Kanzu doesn't have an ancient sword lady or a treasure sword lady. He started his path as a famous sword lady. Actually, he has an ancient sword rank sword maiden and a treasure sword rank sword maiden. The ancient sword rank sword maiden is me, and the treasure sword rank sword maiden is the fishbowl sword." As soon as Qingping opened her mouth, she revealed a secret that no human had ever heard of. Everyone shifted their attention to Du Yu. The little lowly expressed with a cute face that the sword ancestor's memory that she had received regarding the fishbowl sword did not contain any memory of the sword ancestor. Her first master was definitely not the sword ancestor. The reason why you don't have any memory of fleeting time calendar is because your personality was destroyed by me, the Qingping sword said coldly. Back then, I thought that fleeting year calendar was the new Hongjun that old master mentioned. At that time, I didn't think of splitting a soul to deal with him, so I could only deal with him with my own will. My acting was quite good, but I didn't expect the Yuchang sword to discover my true intentions, so I killed her soul. I didn't expect fleeting time calendar to find out about this, so he personally broke me and threw me into a desert. He thought that no one would be able to discover my existence from then on. But the sword master never expected that a few years later, someone would build a city on that desert. He even turned the place where I was into the sword burial ground. He used it to repair the damaged sword ladies and me. The person and city that Qingping sword was referring to were, of course, Zhetianjendi and Yuzhang City. So that's how it is. That's why the Liunyan family sent people to take you away from me at all costs, right? They didn't want to harm me, but to protect me, right? Ji Yuhan suddenly understood many things. He understood why Rina Takasaka was so insistent on snatching the sword of poverty from him back then, but she was unwilling to harm his life. Guhan had always thought that the Liunyan family did this to steal the Qingpin sword from him, coveting the Qingpin sword's high value and power. From the looks of it now, the Liunyan family probably did this to protect him, to prevent him from falling into the Qingpin sword's trap. It seemed like the Liunyan family had always been doing good things. That's about it. Although the Liunyan family didn't know what my goal was until his death, he could vaguely sense that my goal was related to the old master. That's why he abandoned me in such a secluded place, hoping that the future Hongjun wouldn't find me. But he never expected that I would become that person's first sword lady. The Qingping sword's words had solved many of the mysteries. Should I thank the Liunyan family properly? Guhan smiled bitterly as he looked in the direction of Mount Liunyan. Mount Liunyan and the Liunyan family were still intact. This surprised Guhan. The 12 Zhu Wu's hatred for humans was so strong that he even destroyed Yangjing City, but he didn't destroy Mount Liunyan and the Liunyan family. This was very strange. Once upon a time, Guhan had wanted to set foot on Mount Liunyan to take revenge for the Qingping sword and the Jiyu Xuanwu. From the looks of it now, the hatred for the Qingpin sword no longer existed. The only reason for Guhan to take revenge was the Jiyu Xuanwu. However, the last successor of the Liunyan family had become his woman. How could Guhan have the face to take revenge on the Liunyan family? Was he here to play a game of domestic violence? On the other side, Qingping, who had already opened her mouth, continued to ramble on. After I met you, I knew that I couldn't make the same mistake as the fleeting calendar back then. So, after I transformed into the Sword Maiden, I immediately split a soul fragment to replace my original soul, and I hid in the sword to sleep. Even if I don't say it, you and I both know it, don't you? No wonder you were taller and colder when you completed your synchronization. I thought it was because you slept for too long. So it turns out that the first time I saw you was the real you. The next time I saw you was my Qingpin. Guhan sighed. He recalled the first time he and Qingpin met. These scenes lingered in Guhan's mind, and Guhan couldn't forget them. My plan was so good, but the Liunyan family came out halfway. I had no choice but to save your life and let you know of my existence. Afterwards, that little bastard took control of me and took half of my soul energy. She even rode on top of me and wanted to devour my existence. Qingping said with a face full of resentment, but in the end, I still won, and she lost. After I returned to Old Master's hands, with the help of Old Master's power, I directly devoured that little bastard's soul. It was so satisfying, so satisfying. That little bastard is gone. He'll never appear again. Don't even think about seeing that little bastard again. Ha 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 ha. Satisfying. Satisfying. Qingping began to laugh maniacally. Although Guhan had already guessed this, he still couldn't help but feel the world shake when he heard it from Qingping's mouth. The 80 billion fragments of his consciousness began to collide violently, causing Guhan's soul to feel like it was about to explode. She lost to the master she loved the most. In the hands of the master that she usually wanted to protect, this was really a huge joke. Ha 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 ha. On the other side, Qingping continued to mock loudly. Actually, the one who killed that little bastard wasn't me, nor was it the old master. It was you. Qingping shouted savagely. If you hadn't allowed me to take over that body, if you hadn't pretended to be smart and used yourself as bait to assassinate the old master, if you had suppressed me the moment you discovered me, then your Qingping wouldn't have died, and she wouldn't have been devoured by me. It's you, you're the one who killed that little bastard. Ha 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 ha. Poochie. Guhan couldn't bear the stimulation any longer. The 80 billion fragments of consciousness in his head all exploded. Guhan's head was like a ruptured water pipe. Intense blood spurted out from the 7 holes in his head. There was even sticky brain matter mixed within the blood. Qingping. In the silent abyss, Guhan called out this name. For the first time in his life, he felt so regretful about a decision he had made. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.